Okay, we're gonna go live.
All right.
Oh my god.
Jesus
Okay,
Christ.
we're officially live. I hope your cat.
Okay.
I hope your cat's settled down
Oh my God. Just
now.
ridiculous.
That's hilarious.
She's
We were trying to go
just
live like
yelling.
for the last minute, and the cat was just like going crazy, just in the like eating the headphones, screaming. But I think we're good to go now. So how are you getting on to all the comrades in the chat? Good to see you there. I see Sydney Rika, Oliver Smith, Jessidiah, Real Politics, Socialist Swan, Juche Necromancer, Real Politics, Jake English, The Partisan, Martin Barkov, Eros Viana, great to see you as well. Howdy friends, Young Simba. A lot of great heads in the chat there. How are you getting on? It's good to see you on this Friday evening on my end and Friday afternoon on your end. Today we are joined by the wonderful Mel. Well, actually, is it Mel G or Mel B? Because I think Mel Buer,
It's
like from Twitter. What do you prefer?
yeah, it's Mel Buer. I
Buer.
use Mel G, which is just a different pseudonym for Protean, but it's all being sort of changed back to Mel Buer since I started reporting on the protests this summer. So Mel
Right,
B.
right. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. I don't want to give away any of the good stuff. But okay, so Mel B, it's great to have you here. To all the people in the chat, if you haven't checked it out already, go ahead and check out Protein Pirate Radio. There's going to be a great series coming up at the moment. I don't want to give away too much because there's a lot of really good stuff, a lot of fantastic stories we're going to hear today from our comrades. But yeah, you'll find the links to everything of our comrade in the description box below this. So please go and support our comrade on the various platforms on which you will find her. So, comrade, do you want to maybe introduce yourself, say a few words, talk a little bit about your work, maybe if you want to talk a little bit about the upcoming project that you're working on, the global struggle, and all that stuff.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Mel Buer. I'm a independent journalist and scholar from Omaha, Nebraska, in the middle of the United States. Let's see. I've been most recently. A lot of my work has been developing. Hello, kitty. Please get off the desk. Go on. Sorry.
Cat's back.
That's my cat. That's Comrade Princess Peach. Yeah, working from home is great. So I am let's see, the last 8 months or so, I've been working as an independent reporter, reporting on the ground during the George Floyd uprising in the United States. It's been pretty much what I've been focused on. I also host a podcast called Protean Pirate Radio, and I'm the associate editor of Protean Magazine, which is an independent anti-capitalist leftist magazine based in the U.S. Let's see. I am about to start Twitch streaming, which is going to be fun. I am developing a show called The Global Struggle with Mel B, which focuses on left internationalism and global struggles internationally. It's geared toward an American audience who maybe only sees the riot porn on Twitter, but doesn't have a grasp of what's going on in the countries that these uprisings and various organizations are happening. Recently, I've had more international comrades on the podcast. Just recently, in the last couple of months, spoke with activists from Lagos, Nigeria, to talk about NSARS. So a lot of this is just kind of connecting American audiences to international leftist news.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah. So, and then hopefully there'll be like a Friday night get drunk with your comrades stream that talks more about domestic issues because, the United States is insane right now. And there's a lot to talk about. So yeah, that's in development. I don't have a timeline on when that's going to come out, probably in the next month or two. So, and then another project, because I'm a workaholic, is I'm working with another comrade to create a podcast that views revolutionary movies and documentaries or labor movies. And we're just kind of talking about these really cool, formative sort of films as a fun side project. So
that sounds fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask, how often are you planning on releasing this? I know you mentioned on Twitch, you mentioned like the Friday night getting drunk thing, which, by the way, yeah. I'm waiting on my invitation to that, by the way.
Oh yeah, no, you're welcome. You're more than welcome to show up. Once I fix my internet, I think we'll be good. The international Twitch show is hopefully going to be weekly and midweek.
Cool.
And then the podcast, any of the podcasts that I work on, it's usually every 2 weeks we release an episode. And now that the my cat is screaming. I'm so sorry. Now
It's
that
okay.
now that I'm getting done with my graduate degree in May, I'm going to have a lot more time to really kind of focus on these projects that I really love to do.
Mm,
So, yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. That's really cool. I gotta say to people in the chat here, this conversation is pretty strange to me because I've been listening. I've been listening to Comrade Mel like throughout the years. So we talk about this thing like parasocial relationships and stuff like that, where like you can just like feel like you know someone, you're kind of friendly with them, and like, but then like this is actually the first time that we've ever spoken, and
Right?
we kind of both have known each other kind of in that weird kind of parasocial way a bit, and
Mhm.
it's kind of it's kind of surreal. It
Yeah,
feels
it's always you feel like like this happens with like podcasters too. Like
yeah.
we feel like we all know and interact with each other, and then we've never actually spoken.
Yes, exactly.
But
But
then you
also,
start speaking to them, and it's like I actually know who you are, and in my mind there's already like this comradeship that's developed, but like we
yes,
haven't actually spoken face to face or over Zoom. So this
yeah,
is cool.
it's kind of
It's been a long
uncanny.
time coming.
It feels a little weird because I'm just like, oh shit. It doesn't. It feels weird, like kind of like knowing shit about people without having actually spoken to them about it. It's very like you were like talking about like academia there, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember you talking about academia on this podcast before. I remember like back in Coffee with Comrades, I used to cycle home from work, and listen to this shit, and
Right,
it's
right.
just it's I don't know, it's trippy or something like that. It's
It is.
have you
It's
appeared
very
on
trippy.
have you appeared on like other people's podcasts and just had a moment where you're just like, oh shit, I'm actually talking to such and such.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, actually.
it's so weird.
The Eat the Rich folks at the
Mm.
beginning of the year just like randomly invited them to like do like a mega podcast with like Max Alvarez from Working People to talk about the election, and we had them
Mm.
on and we were talking about the billionaires who were part of the Democratic primaries. And I just remember sitting there going like, "Holy crap." I'm looking at these dudes in the face on Zoom going, this is the first time I've ever seen what you look like. Uh cool. This is so cool, because we've interacted on Twitter for so long, you get a little
Yeah,
starstruck. And
you
you know,
do.
I think
Yeah.
I think I think those boys felt the same way, because you never like really understand like uh uh how much influence you have in other people's lives when you're doing this kind of work. And then
Yeah.
you get to know them and you're like, these people are fucking cool. They're
They're
just
just
down to
cool.
earth
They're
individuals,
also just normal
Yeah.
people. They're not like they're not like
Totally normal, very smart people. Yeah.
you should not put people up on like this pedestal, like, and we do have a tendency to do that. I think, if you listen to like a podcast or you watch someone online, whatever sort of like media it might be, like, I don't know, we do tend to put people on
Right.
pedestals, and like we really fucking shouldn't. We should get away from that sort of thing, because
We really should.
I remember like a few years
We
ago,
really fucking should.
I just remember like even like a few years ago, the influence that like certain like podcasters and YouTubers had on my own like political development. And I think like Brett from Rev Left Radio, Brett from Rev Left Radio. Um,
Yeah, Brett is one of my really good friends.
oh my god, I literally he's still a god to me. Like I can't.
He is the most wonderful human being. We live in the same city. We actually organized together before he started his podcast.
Like in
Yeah.
real
So
life, you know
in
him.
real life, I know him in real life. I know his family. I know, yeah, yeah, yeah.
You've
I've
touched.
known him for like 5 years. Yeah.
You've touched
He's a
God.
really cool dude. He is so down to earth. He is a wonderful human being.
Everyone
Wonderful
should
human
aspire.
being.
Everyone should aspire to be like Brett.
Brett is just, I love Brett. Brett is very cool.
Yeah, it, really
Yeah.
it tripped me out when I was talking to him as well, because I was listening to him and I was just like, oh, okay, it's kind of like I'm on a podcast right now, so I'm just gonna keep listening to you and you're gonna keep talking like it's a podcast. I'm like, oh shit, I'm in a conversation. I need to interact. Oh,
Yeah,
fuck.
right.
How am I gonna match that?
Look. Yeah. Yeah. Brett's actually the reason I got into podcasting, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that actually
Yeah.
that kind of segues pretty well into a later question, which let's not be too rigid. Let's go for it. Let's get into how you got into podcasting and how this all happened. We can come back to the other questions a little bit later maybe. And yeah, tell us.
Sure. Yeah.
How did Brett bring you in? Were you so inspired?
Brett invited me on to talk about, what was it? Alcoholism and addiction and revolutionary sobriety, which is kind of hilarious.
I'll drink to that.
But we were talking about we were talking about just sort of God, this conversation was so long ago. It was like in January of 2019, I think.
Mm,
He brought me on, and we had this really cool conversation just about drinking and addiction, and I kind of lampooned AA a little too much, I think, and I've since
mm,
walked back some of those comments. But like,
right.
um, the conversation ended. This is the first time that I was ever on a podcast, and then he invited me back again to do like a round table about various politics. I don't remember what we were exactly talking about at the time, but it was with other activists from Omaha, and we were just kind of sitting around doing a round table.
Mm.
And both times after we finished the recording, him and a couple other people were like, "You have a really nice voice for radio. Have you ever considered starting your own podcast?" And I was like, I don't I don't know, like I've never considered that. Like I get, they're like, "You have really good insight. You might as well try it." Um and fucking a couple of weeks later, I joined Twitter because I figured folks would want to talk to me about the episode. That's the reason why I joined Twitter in the first place.
Right.
To be able to open up a through line of communication to listeners and stuff. And then I got into a conversation with Pearson Bolt from Coffee with Comrades.
Mm.
Um, and he was looking for a new co-host for Coffee with Comrades. And we just started talking in the DMs, and he was, he's a very wonderful human being. I appreciate his insight all the time. And he was like, "How do you feel about being co-host on Coffee with Comrades?" And I was like, "Sure." Like this
Fuck
was
it.
literally like the space of like, I get on Rev Left. Brett goes, "You have a really nice radio voice. You should try getting on podcasting." Literally like 3 weeks later, Pearson's like, "Do you want to join my podcast?" And I was like, "Yeah, that would be so cool." It's just a very, serendipitous sort of
Yeah,
moment.
absolutely.
Um, and that's kind of what started the journey into podcasting. I was already like a year into my graduate degree at that point, and I was trying to figure out, what was going to, happen next. And it sort of all just kind of worked out over the course of 2019. I co-hosted Coffee with Comrades with Pearson. I think it was about 30 or so episodes. In that time, I also traveled to Scotland and walked with the Gilets Jaunes in Paris and reported on that for the podcast, which was a wild trip.
Yeah.
And then when I got back, I became associate editor of Protean magazine, and then Protean let me take the reins and build my own um, podcast for Protean, which has been the project over 2020, which is Protean Pirate Radio. And so from that point forward, Pearson and I kind of went our separate ways. He's still doing Coffee with Comrades. I started in on this new podcast project, which has had its fits and starts. Grad school is really hard, and it's almost impossible in a pandemic. So,
Yeah.
we're slowly moving toward it. But then I started really getting into on the ground reporting in the United States, in Minneapolis, and here in Omaha over the course of 2020. And I just recently in the last couple of months made the decision that grad school is going to end. I'm probably not going to get a job in academia, which is fine. So I might as well
Fuck
just like
yeah. We're
put
gonna have to talk about that,
both
by the
feet.
way. I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to it because I actually there was a time in my life when I aspired to academia as well, and I haven't talked about it that much,
yeah.
but I would like to dive into it a bit more.
It was a hard decision to make for sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we'll
yeah.
probably
So
circle
then I
back
just
to it, I
decided to
think.
put like Yeah, I just decided to put both feet in and really get into all aspects of broadcast journalism. It runs in the
Class.
family. My dad is also a journalist and has been for
Oh.
45 years.
Like an independent
And
or like working with someone,
he
or how
he
does it
works
work?
with local media outlets. Yeah.
Cool. Cool.
Um, so a lot of it is just kind of like just kind of been returning to journalism as much as I think I'm not going to do it. I always end up back in it. So here I am. You know. So that's the plan for the future. Hopefully, it's productive.
Very cool. Can
You
I
know.
can I ask just like as a very broad kind of question that I was just thinking about right now, like journalist, as a journalist, how in terms of like employment, in terms of income, in terms of actually making a living as a journalist, is that a very difficult decision to say I'm going to try and carve out a life for myself as a journalist? Are there options? Are there pathways for you to actually enter into employment, or is it mostly like you're gonna have like you're gonna be commissioned to do this or commissioned to do that? I mean, just like from a worker's perspective, how does that play out?
From a worker's perspective, freelancing is really difficult because you are essentially spearheading your own contracts. It requires a lot of pitching to publications, asking them to buy whatever you've reported, right? The likelihood of me getting a staff job as an anti-capitalist journalist at any number of corporate newsrooms that may be able to pay me some sort of salary is extremely low.
Yeah.
Very low. There are options at progressive, independent nonprofits, right?
Mm,
The problem is just like every other, just like in academia, like in pretty much every other industry, particularly in the United States, there's a finite number of jobs for people. It's a very precarious sort of industry in a lot of ways. And
yeah.
so most of the independent journalists that you see that get their bylines in places like the New York Times or NBC or these types of places, they're all contractors. They're all just scrapping it, just
Jesus.
gumshoe, they can get, freelance contracts for, and then you develop a relationship with editors and you can kind of secure your employment that way.
Mm,
But it's mostly precarious, right? So for me, in a lot of ways, um, and I know that this is the case with a lot of anti-capitalist journalists, independent journalists in the United States, is that we prefer to be freelance and we prefer to seek out alternative means of income in terms of like a Twitch stream or a Patreon, right?
yeah.
Because it also allows us the freedom to continue to do our work without sacrificing political, ethical, or moral ideals that we may have to set aside in order to keep a job at some corporate place,
Mm,
right?
mm.
And I am an unapologetic anti-capitalist, anti-fascist leftist. I have
Based.
absolutely no qualms with saying that publicly, and I don't want anyone to ever tell me otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. Is
So I
there
just, that's carving out a place for myself in
mm,
that way.
is there any space for like, I just want to like in terms of like specifically where you are like in the United States, is there any space for this kind of anti-capitalist, socialist, communist kind of voices within the mainstream? I mean, like a lot of,
Yes,
I think what
absolutely.
it's kind of a thing. Like it's almost like a kind of like a tokenized communist that they'll have like in like a newspaper, like maybe a centrist, like liberal newspaper or something like that. They might have like a column that's written by some anti-capitalist or something like that. And I wonder.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you just have to look at, Kim Kelly is a really great example. She's a labor reporter and she's an anti-capitalist. And she has gotten bylines, regular bylines, specifically talking about anarchism, talking about the labor movement, talking about labor rights, talking about all sorts of things, anti-fascism in, the metal scene. That's kind of where she sits with her own stuff. And those
Class.
bylines show up in Teen Vogue. They show up in The Guardian. These
Mm,
folks, you just got to catch the ear of the right editor, and
mm,
this type of work can show up in more mainstream outlets, right? And I'm actually hoping to write a book about the anti-capitalist um, media ecosystem that is built into independent media in the United States, because there is actually it exists. It
mm,
exists. It's here. It's being constantly built and reimagined and moved forward. It's just hard to cut through the noise of mainstream media.
mm,
But there are anti-capitalists journalists who are sort of setting up an alternative to the hyper partisanship and divisive nature of corporate media. You know
mm.
what I mean?
Very cool.
So yeah, it's freaking sweet. I love it, and I I really hope that my book proposal gets accepted because like this is going
Yeah.
to be a really fun book to write. I think.
Can I ask, like, what like, if it doesn't get accepted, will you do like an independent publishing on
Oh
Amazon
yeah, I'll
or
write it
on?
anyways. Hell yeah,
It's getting written anyway. Great.
gonna happen.
I'm glad to hear
Yeah.
that, and yeah, just let me know, and we'll shout that out and do what we can to get our comrades reading this brilliant text. I'm looking forward to reading that. There's a comrade in the chat who's asking if you are a part of IWWFJU.
I am indeed. Yes, I am a
Based.
member of the IWW Freelance Journalist Union. I have been a member since June of 2019. Um, I could show you my press pass around here somewhere. But
Oh,
yeah,
your
the
cat has
Freelance
it.
Journalists Union is a fantastic branch of the IWW, and it's comprised of freelance journalists from all over the country. So it's a really unique sort of branch of the IWW where you're not necessarily bound by any sort of geographical restrictions. And you
Mm,
can still organize. So, a lot of the organizing projects are focused on making sure that freelancers get paid, because there a lot of times you can submit invoices of up to a couple thousand to $10,000 and they don't get paid,
yeah,
even though they publish the work, right?
yeah.
We talk a lot, we're all working on various organizing projects to keep the building our membership. And an FJU press pass was part of the reason that I didn't get arrested by the cops last summer
Oh
doing my work.
shit.
So,
We're gonna dive into the good stuff soon.
it lends some legitimacy, to my
Yeah.
reporting as an independent reporter. We get stepped on by the cops a lot. So, yeah, I love it. I love my fellow workers. I love what we do. I am 100% an unapologetic wobbly, and I will be a member of this great big union
Nice.
for the rest of my life. So,
Fantastic. Oh, that's
yeah.
fantastic. We actually, the IWW isn't huge in Ireland. I kind of wish it was actually, because unfortunately the Irish unions are horrific. They're just capitalist
Mm.
unions essentially. They're not capitalist unions. They're just basically sellouts. Like the people who rose to the top of the labor movement just completely sold out in Ireland. And especially approaching like from 1990 onwards, we introduced legislation via the Industrial Relations Act 1990, which made basically all union organising pretty much illegal in Ireland, which is really fucked up. You can't do sympathetic strikes. If you want to do any kind of workers' strike, you need to give like notice of about 7 days. You need to do like a silent ballot, like like sneak. You need to sneak around and do like a ballot and make sure that everyone votes on actually doing the strike. I mean, they just made it
Mm.
basically impossible. So if you're really pissed off that your boss did something really shitty on a Tuesday and you want to strike on Wednesday or Thursday, not possible. You're gonna need to wait until the following Wednesday or Thursday to make it happen. So it
It's
sucks.
I mean, we don't, there's a whole lot of organizing that's still happening
Yeah.
here. The nationwide labor unions definitely got gutted in the 80s, and it's an uphill battle,
It
right?
is.
Because
Yeah.
the country's largest federation of unions, the AFL-CIO, still allows cop unions into their ranks, right? Which is a
Jesus.
cop unions aren't unions. You know, so, there's labor
Bourgeois
relations in
unions.
our country are also sort of fraught in many ways, but
Yeah.
the organizing still continues, and I find organizing with the IWW to be the most rewarding,
Mm.
because I don't have to question the values of the union,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
politically speaking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really good point. Unfortunately, I mean, the IWW has an explicitly anti-capitalist perspective globally, which is brilliant. Unfortunately, all the unions in Ireland, the mainstream unions, are actually. I was gonna say they're social democratic. They're not even social democratic. They're neoliberal, just through and through neoliberal, and it's horrific to see. It's horrible. I wish they still had principles, because there was a time actually there was a time like back in the 60s in like where Ireland had the highest union density in Europe, and we had this great labor movement, and between 60s and 70s in Ireland there was genuine like revolutionary potential, and yeah, it just it didn't work out, and it sucks. But anyway, we could talk about like the the tragedies of the labor movement and of the socialist movement throughout the 20th century until the cows come home. But yeah, like we can
Yeah,
probably
there's
move
plenty
on.
to chat about.
There's plenty of errors
Oh, yes.
and
Oh, yes.
tragedies to talk about in that regard. But we push forward anyway. I do want to
Right.
say thank you to Red Pill in the chat there, who has donated $2, who says love and peace from Antifa equals anti-fascist, is what they say. Thank you very much, comrade. I really appreciate that. That is absolutely brilliant. And yeah, thank you very, very much, Comrade Mel. That was fantastic. There's so much to talk about here. We've kind of jumped into the end. We talked about like podcasting, we talked a little bit about academia and journalism and all this sort of stuff. But we're gonna be vibing, having some fun, taking it easy for basically this entire stream. I do want to say that for people in the chat, if you have like questions, please just let me know. Just type at Paul Marin, and I'll take them down. We'll answer them as they come. So if you have any questions for me, if you have any questions for Mel, let's go for it. Let's just put them in there, and we'll answer them just as we get to them. But for now, let's sort of maybe wind it back in a little bit. Let's dial it back slightly. This is the thing. We have like an introduction. You know, Mel, I told you about this. I told you about this before this happened. I said, I said
We
there.
could talk for 4 hours and not even make it through the introductions.
Exactly. We were gonna have an intro. We literally haven't gotten past the introduction section. Okay, well, let's move on to question 2. Beyond the introduction, tell us about your political development over the years and what brought you to the left.
Oh man. Okay. Well, let's see where to start. I think we can. Okay, so my family is thoroughly working class. My parents bent over backwards to send me and my siblings to private schools because they wanted us to get that education.
Can I ask,
But
private schools in the United
Catholic,
States, Catholic private schools?
Catholic school,
Oh shit! I'm so sorry.
not public. Yeah.
Indoctrinated.
I wore school uniforms all the way through high school, which
Oh
is not
shit!
normal.
It was like you went to school in Ireland. Oh fuck.
Yeah. It's not
Sorry.
a normal thing in the United States. But my parents are extremely working class, and so we it was work studies to pay tuition. It was that kind of thing. When I was in high school, I went through your typical punk rebellious phase, right? And
You listen to
that,
Anti-Flag?
oh yeah,
Yeah, me too. They were the first one to turn me on to
casualties,
anarchist. Yes, like when I
like
was.
Kennedys, like
Oh, the dead Kennedy. Fuck that. Nazi punch.
yeah.
Fuck off. Nazi punch.
Yep.
Fuck off. Yes.
So
Oh my god.
I had the mohawk and all that fun stuff.
You got a mohawk? Oh shit.
I
Pictures.
did, yeah.
Pictures.
Fuck. I think there's maybe one
Picture to
picture
nothing.
that survives from that time period.
Did you dye it?
No, because I was in Catholic school, so they wouldn't let me dye my hair, but I could keep
Okay.
the mohawk,
But
right?
they let you have the mohawk? That's pretty
Yeah,
liberal.
yeah, yeah.
By Irish standards, anyway.
I'm actually still wearing the class ring from my high school. If that.
Oh shit.
A lot of
What rules?
indoctrination, a lot of weird stuff. Okay.
Oh yeah. I know all about
But
it.
what happened when I joined,
sympathies.
sort of punk movement in high school is I was introduced to the writings of Emma Goldman. And I read her autobiography in high school, and I was absolutely 100% taken in by it. And actually, I have a Emma Goldman quote tattooed on me.
Oh shit! Do you want to read out the quote? Or
Yeah,
not?
it's the quote is when we can't dream any longer, we die, which is probably one of my favorite Emma Goldman quotes.
Based.
Stop dreaming, stop living. So I got into college, and I just, I started getting more into reading about anarchism and leftist political philosophy. And for a while there, that was kind of where I was. I didn't really understand what it meant to be an organizer. I didn't really join any protests. It was purely like lifestylist aesthetic for me for a long time. And
Yeah, me too.
then, yeah, and then
Been there.
I joined my first protest, which was an anti-racist protest that happened because the Denver police killed a black man in jail. And I joined one of the protests. I originally joined because I thought I was going to take photos as a student journalist. I put the camera down and walked with them, because I listened to what they had to say. And that was my first experience really, moving past like the lifestyle is sort of reading about, food not bombs and thinking that I was, this hardcore punk with all these like really good political things into like actual praxis, right?
Based.
For a while. And then, unfortunately I fell into a couple of years of addiction and alcoholism and sort of fell out of that. Had a little bit of a reactionary phase trying to get sober. I joined the Mormon church.
What? No way! Really?
Thinking that was going to get me sober.
Well, yeah, I can
No, it
understand it. I can
happened.
understand it. Yeah, I mean, you probably
Yeah.
associated this like this kind of lifestyle with radicalism, and so like the snapback reaction, of course, is to go the
Yeah.
complete opposite way. It makes sense.
Yep. Yep. And then when I actually got sober, when I was 21, I was back in Omaha away from Denver. And I fell in with a group of people about a year and a half in, right before Trump got elected, that really started helping me along with my own political education
Hmm.
in a really meaningful way. And then Trump got elected, and then I started really organizing.
Based.
And, over the course of the intervening years, I had read various theorists, philosophers, all these types of things. So it's not like, it was a lot of like theory heavy that I could understand a lot of this sort of leftist radical politics, but not a ton of praxis, right? Not a ton of doing the work. I briefly joined Occupy, but was scared away by the police crackdowns in Occupy,
Yeah.
so like
Yeah.
it's been sort of this kind of interesting sort of jumble. In the last 5 years, I've really started to really understand my place among the left. My personal politics has shifted quite significantly,
Hmm.
to the point where I'm not sure that I can really put a label on it.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it's really worth it to try and parse that out.
Yeah.
I'm I'm really inspired by like the Takunis, by the Invisible Committee, by Inhabit and the work that they're doing, you know, and sort of I don't even want to call it's not even like post left. It's just general radical leftist philosophy and political organizing is kind of where I sit. I'm
Hmm.
definitely an anti-capitalist. I'm definitely an anti-fascist. And it's I don't know, libertarian socialism with insurrectionary characteristics, I guess. Like
Based.
I haven't really spent a lot of time to really like fit myself into a box, and I don't really feel like I need to do that, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. I
Um,
mean, like the thing is like I suppose the political spectrum in the United States is kind of so far to the right that being an anti-capitalist in itself is pretty radical. Now,
it is.
I'm gonna tell you that something's gonna kind of fuck you up right now. It fucked me up big time recently. In the past few months, there has been in Ireland there has been the rise of the anti-capitalist right.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like literal fucking Nazism. It
Oh,
fucking
yeah.
sucks. And like they're using like the jargon and terminology of the left. Like they'll complain about like global finance capital. They'll complain about the capitalist imperialist system. And you're like, oh, base, that sounds kind of cool. You're like, you hate the capitalist imperialist system? Me fucking too. I hate it
Yeah,
so
it's
much.
the the
And then
next
they're like,
question to ask, though, is what do you wanna replace it with?
yes, exactly.
What is your solution to that,
And
right?
the solution that they give, here's the fucking thing. The solution that they give is like, well, we don't want LGBTQ plus people to have any rights. It's like, what the fuck is that? That's not an answer. What's wrong with
Ding,
you?
ding, 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 fascism, that's what
You
that is,
fuck.
like,
Well, we want white people to be in charge. What the fuck? What's the matter with you? That's not. You're
I mean,
not challenging capitalism in any way at all. Like, what is wrong? Like, do you understand how class society has developed? This is so fucking ridiculous.
yeah. I mean, we're having a lot of those conversations on the left here after the storming of the Capitol, right? These insurrectionists, if you wanna call them that, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I've been on a couple of streams in the last couple of days just kind of trying to parse through what the fuck happened on Wednesday,
Jesus, yeah.
Um, I don't have all the answers, right? What I do know is that should people be able to challenge the state? Yes.
Mm.
Should fascists be able to be the ones leading that charge? Fuck no.
Based.
Like, seriously,
Fuck
it's
that.
like the what we saw on Wednesday was um, a mobilized base of the far right who are either driven by literal Nazi ideology or some sort of offshoot of fanatical conspiracy theories bordering on fascist, fascistic, symbolism.
Yeah.
And uh, there were members of the military, federal employees, and off duty cops who were part of that group who flashed their badges at the cops in the Capitol. so that they could gain entry to the Capitol.
Mm.
Um, and they stormed the Capitol building.
So fucked
You
up.
know, it's
And I've seen
and the
videos as
fallout
well.
is going to be massive.
Yeah.
I watched the live streams all day,
Do
and the
you?
fallout is going to be fucking massive. Like there were IEDs with timer devices planted at both the RNC and the DNC. People like to say that this was like an unruly mob of people, but really what I think it was mixed company of like diehard Nazis,
Mm-hmm.
folks part of neo-Nazi fascist groups that are mobilizing, um, very dangerous militias like the Oath Keepers and Three Percenters who were there for the express reason of taking hostages in the Senate,
Jesus.
occupying the building.
Mm.
And, and then mixed in with a sort of, Trump supporting MAGA crowd who are just as fanatical and obsessed, right? But maybe don't have a plan.
Mm.
You got the sense once they got into the Capitol building that half of the crowd was very tense and like, I don't think they expected to even breach the doors. The other half were like posting on social media as they're sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk looking at her computer, Like I don't think anyone really had any idea of what to do after they got in there.
What do you do the
Um
day after the revolution?
Fuck. Post-insurrection society, what's going on, But, like, you've got members of state legislature who were there, who are now getting arrested. So what we're seeing is, like, at its very base core is just this giant crisis of legitimacy for the United States,
Mm.
and it remains to be seen what happens next,
Mm.
I don't think
Mm.
any of us really have any idea, you know?
No, fuck.
Um,
That'd be interesting.
and
Do
I
you?
I certainly don't, and I'm not gonna sit here and try and predict what the next 6 months to a year is gonna look like or the next 2 months.
Mm.
But it's definitely, uncharted territory just a little bit for in our current material conditions with our current, political situation in the United States. It's gonna
Mm.
be, we'll see what happens,
Yeah,
you know?
do you foresee crackdowns like Biden? Like I'm thinking, oh, what was the name of that fucker in the 1990s who really cracked down really hard? He tried to like push back, like, oh, you don't want to be like a soft liberal, you want to be like a tough guy. So he ended up being like way worse than Republicans. What was his name? Clinton. Bill
Um,
Clinton. Bill Clinton, of course.
Clinton?
Bill Clinton like was
Yeah.
really harsh and like he really cracked like he was way harsher to the left than anyone expected. Do you foresee? I mean, we're kind of, I suppose. How can I say? This is kind of idealism right here. We're kind of just guessing and see, and stuff.
Yeah,
But what do you think?
heavy
Do you think there'll be
heavy
a
dose.
response?
Yeah, I do. A heavy dose of take this with a grain of salt to anyone who's watching this. But my sense is that depending on how the narrative unfolds, because so far the mainstream media has made a point to really drive home the point that the attendees were pro-Trump
Mm,
extremists, right?
mm,
The BLM protesters were not among the crowd, right?
mm.
Should that narrative change, then we're going to see some things change. But the fallout from this is likely going to be heavier surveillance state.
Yeah, probably
I
against
would
the
be very
left
surprised.
mostly.
I would be very surprised if we didn't have like a second version of the Patriot Act get rammed through Congress in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
Um, Mostly because these folks organized in public on social media. So censorship is going to be huge, I think. And as far as like what happens next beyond that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's
Yeah.
really difficult to predict exactly what's going to happen. And you know, what I do think though is that this was a galvanizing moment for the far right. And a couple of my comrades, we have a bit of a disagreement on this, right?
Mm.
But I think what we saw is the far right saw that they can storm the motherfucking Capitol building
Literally.
and make it through the front doors. Okay. I mean, we felt the same sort of elation when the left realized that they could burn down a police precinct in May of last year, right? It's
It's
the
a
same
nice
shit.
reminder.
If it happens once, it can happen again,
Mm.
right? The right sees that. They also know that one of their attendees, a veteran and a QAnon supporter, was shot in the chest by Secret Service and killed. So they have
Mm,
a martyr now. They have
that's
their own
right.
Vicky Weaver, right?
Yeah.
So they have martyrs. They have political prisoners because the folks who are getting arrested are going to end up in jail for anywhere from a year to 10 years, you know, potentially longer, depending on what kind of stuff they did. And those folks are getting arrested by the feds. We also have far right factions who feel completely betrayed by Trump. So they will be looking for another strongman leader
Mm.
to take that place, right? Trump is out the door. They were, they did what he asked and he stabbed them in the back.
Fuck.
And what we're seeing is a lot of anger as a result of that, right? So, almost like you could check every box for how this is a galvanizing moment for the far right. And it would not, I mean, the radical left, the folks on the left here have been sort of seeing this coming down the pike for a long time. We just didn't know when it was going to happen and how it was going to play out, right? But fascism in this country, in the weeks leading up to this, Proud Boys were showing up to DC to start street brawls,
Mm.
right? With just random folks in DC. Um, and it caused a lot of headache and a lot of injury, even to fellow workers in my own union. We were trying to find that they were jumped by Proud Boys and, injured. And so there was a lot of street violence. And then in the weeks leading up to January 6th, you have these like super far reaching liberal celebrities saying, don't go to DC, let them duke it out with themselves, and then the Capitol building gets stormed. Right. Um,
Jesus.
and, I can't really speak to if there were a big enough counter protest. Would this have happened? I probably not. I don't know. It may have been more bloodshed, right? So
Mm.
maybe it's a blessing that the demonstration kind of continued unabated because um, I'm being extremely cynical, but optics wise, the only people there were
Sure.
far right. You know,
Absolutely.
um, but we just don't know uh, how long how long it's going to be before we really see the true fallout of this
Mm.
insanity.
Mm.
So,
Jesus. That's fucking
yeah,
bleak.
I was supposed to go to DC on the 6th, and I'm kind of I don't know. I don't know how I would feel if I was actually there witnessing that. So I didn't
So
go.
fucked up. Good. I'm
Pretty
glad.
wild.
I'm glad you're safe. And you're okay. Oh, it's so fucked up. Like when we think of the term fascism, it's kind of tricky because we all kind of acknowledge that there's a slow creep towards fascism in the United States. That's pretty much been
Hmm.
happening post Second World War. After the Second World War, really, it's you're seeing that kind of advance. Marxists, we would generally, communists, I mean, would generally see fascism as the open terrorist dictatorship of the most reactionary, most chauvinistic, and most imperialist elements of finance capital. And Donald Trump would definitely embody that, very much so. But Donald Trump was also playing by the rules of bourgeois parliamentary democracy in many ways. Now, he might have been laying the pathway towards something more sinister, Proud Boys stand by. You go, what the fuck? I mean, this is
I mean,
proper.
that's an incitement for sure.
Exactly,
You
yeah,
know.
right. So, I mean, like, let's see how things go. But shit, I really hope it doesn't, it doesn't become that sort of open terroristic dictatorship. But shit, it fucking looks likely at this stage, to be honest with you.
I mean,
Open terroristic dictatorship rather than just being kind of like a subtle, hidden, behind the scenes terroristic dictatorship where you have wars on Iraq and there's all this kind of stuff going on behind the scenes which we don't really see as being fascistic, at least in the mainstream. Like I don't think that in a fascist society you and I will be having this kind of conversation. I don't think that you'll
oh
be
no.
you'll be able to say fuck capitalism or
Oh
stuff
no,
like
I'd
that.
be I'd be in jail already.
Yeah.
They don't like journalists. So,
No,
um,
very much
no,
not.
but what I would say is what we have seen now is an irreparable split in the GOP and the Republican Party, between the more extremist factions and the quote unquote moderate type GOP types.
Yeah.
I I'm curious to see how this looks in the future. Um, we just had a presidential election. We've got midterms coming up in 2 years, which means, depending on how this goes, we're either going to see a growing element in our Congress um, um, of these sort of extremists, sort of QAnon caucuses, if you will, which is kind of a odd thing to think about.
Mm,
But yeah, someone in your chat said that, the Republican Party has been fascist since Goldwater, at least. I tend to agree. The current political paradigm has kind of been similar over the last, I would say, 50 years or so. That it's been this steady sort of march toward the inevitable conclusion, which is
yeah,
kind of this huge political split, and the worsening material conditions due to COVID-19 and the pandemic and what it's done to the United
yeah,
States specifically, is huge. I was having this conversation with a comrade earlier today, because he's a little skeptical about how entrenched far right factions are in the United States.
mm,
And it's like, look, these moderate sort of MAGA folks who are now betrayed by the Trumpist sort of party, are still going to be feeling, many of them are still going to be feeling the effects of worsening material conditions and are going to be looking for a strong solution. Now, it's a sort of war of rhetoric. What looks the most attractive to folks who have nothing left to lose, you
yeah,
know? And so for the left to really stand a fucking chance, we need to continue organizing and working on providing information about what could potentially be, right? And say, look, shit sucks. You want to make it better? You know? Like, that's why I ended up in this, right? Because shit sucked for me. My material conditions have never really been something to tip your hat at, you know what I
uh-huh,
mean? Like,
yeah.
I've always been working poor, ever since
Can
I
I
hit
ask?
adulthood. I've
Can I ask on that particular point? Was there a point in your life, in your development, where you felt or you thought that you were like you were middle class? You know, there's this kind of thing like I actually was tricked into this at a certain stage of my life. And I'm really embarrassed. I'm really embarrassed about it. But there was like a certain stage of my life where I thought I was like quote lower middle class, which is absolute bullshit. It's like
well, I
so
yeah.
did you fall into that kind of trap of believing, that you were sort of part of this middle class? It's kind of this American dream that's been imported all over the world. We're all middle class. We don't need to worry about class struggle. Everything's okay. Did you fall into that trap at any point, or were you always
Well,
conscious of being working class?
let me put it this way. When my parents were together, as a kid, I had a great childhood. We lived in a nice house out in, it wasn't a suburb really. It was just kind of a nice neighborhood with a bunch of other kids around. And so I
Mm,
never really felt like there was any sort of financial strife, right? Because my parents were very good at making sure that we never noticed it. You know,
mm,
um, um, what was going on behind the scenes between the two of them was a little bit more, bills got paid, but bankruptcy happened. There were these things that happened that were sort of indicative of living among the working class. And I think for me, my
yeah.
increased class consciousness, as I got into the later half of high school and into college and sort of like ruminating on where our family sat in the whole deal. It's like we were all working class because we worked for a wage.
Mm,
And that this concept of middle class is a sort of way to sort of divide the working class and put the
yes.
onus on the individual, right? Because
Exactly.
if you see that there's more class mobility, as in, you can start working poor, pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of thing, then that divides what would be a united wage working class, right?
Mm,
Um, and we see that still today, where I got flack on Twitter for supporting the engineers at Google who organized the Alphabet Workers Union, and started
right.
a union drive.
Mm,
It's like very early stages in terms of like announcing the union drive and trying to include more workers in the union drive. Folks got mad at me because they said, these folks are white collar engineers. Um, they make more money than me, but they are thoroughly working class
you
because they
know
don't own. production,
What you
right?
said was white collar. That's it. Like white collar, blue collar is a bullshit division.
It's all
It's
divisions, man.
bullshit.
It's all
This is
divisions. Like
the capitalists are
I
using this against us to divide the working class. It's
exactly.
bullshit.
Right. And so, if folks are organizing inside one of, it's an evil company. It's a shitty monopoly. It's a global fucking menace is what Google is, right? But
Mm,
those workers still work for a wage.
that's right.
And, I might get canceled for this, I'm sure. But, they work for a wage and they are experiencing shit
Yeah,
treatment, surveillance. Oh my God, union busting up the ass, man. Like they have
it's
been fighting
crazy.
for over a year to try and organize the small group. I mean, it's only about 225 employees right now, right? But the whole idea I think, and I think a lot of people um, sort of, I'm still reading into exactly how this union is going to work. But like, imagine the potential of an alphabet workers union that's a wall to wall union. It doesn't matter if you are a quote unquote white collar engineer who makes $90,000 a year, or if you're the janitor cleaning up the trash underneath their desk. If you work at Google, then you may be able to be a part of this union. And imagine the potential to then extend that to contractors,
Mm,
right? Who also, they're not full-time staffed employees of Google, but they're contracting with Google. Then you open it up to them, right? So then you have a united workforce of hundreds of thousands of employees all under one union, the
imagine.
Alphabet Workers Union.
Yeah,
God, those bosses must be shaking.
crazy. Yeah, absolutely.
Can you imagine one of the largest tech companies in the world unionizing like that?
Jesus
Like,
fuck.
I,
Communism,
if I
please.
were a boss, I would just quit my job. That's just me.
I'm going home.
Right?
Fuck this.
And
It's
people
not worth
people
it.
gave a shit about that. It's like, come on, man. Collective organization is important. And maybe this is just the wobbly in me talking, but like, if you fucking if you want to organize your workplace against the bosses, against unfair workplace practices, against all this bullshit, right?
Mm,
Like, fucking yes, I support you. You
mm,
know, my hope, and it remains to be seen. My hope, though, is that they continue to organize wall to wall within Google. I'm not sure what's going to happen with that, but we shall see.
mm.
Because tech is one of the few industries that is not, you know, leading these sort of union drives for tech workers, right?
That's right.
Um, you Kickstarter was one of the first um, unions to actually like come to the table, and I think they won a bargain with Kickstarter, which is like one of the first tech like websites to actually like seriously unionize
Mm,
among their workforce. Um,
mm,
and so like these types of things are important in realizing collective worker power and strengthening the strength of labor in this country
mm.
against the ruling class. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox. I'm sorry.
No, it was great. It was a really, really important point. I really appreciated it, and I think it's really, really useful because, unfortunately, sometimes we do have that tendency to think that the person who's like a fucking I don't know assistant supervisor who's working alongside you, and you're working at McDonald's, and your assistant supervisor is earning like fucking 5 cents an hour more than you. And we kind of like think that they're like a completely different oppositional class to us, or they're counter revolutionaries or something, and it's kind of ridiculous. Like, we don't really have a clear understanding of what class is, and this is kind of by design as well. Like, for example, you hear a lot of people talking about like the professional managerial class all the time. You hear people talking about like the labor aristocracy and like all these kinds of
Mm,
things,
I
and
see.
and in certain ways, they hint at some truths. There's grains of truths in there. Like, you can talk about like the PMC, as you said. We can talk about the PMC and say that like there are people who are part of this professional managerial class who are maybe more aligned with the bourgeoisie than the standard worker in a factory, or wherever it might be. But at the same time, like a teacher or whatever who's not even earning minimum wage because they can't get like a decent contract, or whatever it might be, their position within the system of exploitation is that they are still earning more money than they are receiving. They are still exploited by capitalists, whether that capitalist is an individual private profiteer or whether that's the state, the bourgeois state, that is exploiting more value from them than they're producing, you know. So fundamentally they are still proletarian, but because we live in this system that wants to divide the working class, we don't see them as that, and we keep talking about them as though they're not, as though like the
What?
teachers going on strike is separate from the
Right.
workers in McDonald's going on strike, which
Right.
is fucked up, you
Well,
know.
it's absolutely hilarious because uh, I think some people on Twitter were like, "Well, these white collar workers aren't coal miners. You know, they're not blue collar. Why do they need a union? It's offensive." And
Mm.
you just gotta remember that in American labor relations and labor history, at one point, coal miners were not considered real workers and therefore didn't need a union.
Like
True.
the quintessential working class position, like the
Right.
coal
At
miner.
at one point, they were not considered, a
Holy
worker that
shit.
required a union.
Wait, okay, just let's check that. Okay, so now today's date, come here to me, Mel. Today's date is the 8th of January 2021. 30 years from now,
Yes.
right? 30 years from now, you and I want the two of us to check back on this and look back at software engineers. Software engineers for Google or for Amazon or whatever company it might be, who are generally considered to be PMC or white collar engineers or whatever it might be. Let's look back on this in 30 years from now and see how that has developed, because they're still exploited like the rest of the
Yeah.
proletariat. They might be at the highest
You
position
you know
within
what's
the
gonna
proletariat, but
you know what's gonna happen? In 2051, it's gonna be like, "Robots don't deserve a union. They're not real workers." Just inter AI interspecies organization, one big union also includes the robots in
it
the
also
tech industry.
it also includes the automation programs that we've created.
Oh my god. So
Google
ridiculous.
worker is not a real proletarian. Google
Right.
worker is a tool of the bourgeoisie.
Shit.
Oh my
Let's
god.
be real though. In 2051, we're gonna be just like totally dead from climate change. So fuck it.
We're dead in the next 10 years. Yeah, the sooner we come to
It'll be
terms with that,
fine.
the better. Oh shit, I'm gonna
Yeah.
pour myself another drink on that note.
Yeah. There you go.
Oh my god,
Still
okay.
sipping on the same beer. I did not prepare for today. It's also 2 o'clock in the afternoon, so I'm not trying to get super wasted. But I only have one beer today.
You've only got one beer, Jesus Christ, man. How are you gonna tolerate my drunken arse? Jesus Christ.
I don't know.
Well, I
Well,
apologize.
it'll be fine. This has been a good conversation so far.
Well,
So
good. I'm glad you've enjoyed it, and hopefully the rest of it won't be just incoherent, drunken Irish rambling. Hopefully it'll still be somewhat productive. We've gotten through a bit. Two questions, kind of ish, and we've got a few more questions to go. Come here to me. I kind of need to run to the bathroom. I might do that quickly because it's kind of like it's like a fork in the road. We either end the conversation here, or we
yeah,
or we keep going. And I just run to the bathroom for a
whatever
couple minutes. So I think that might be
whatever you need to do.
yeah. So I might ask you the next question, which is we're gonna maybe shift the conversation to academia a little bit before we jump into like journalism and all these kinds of things. So I might ask you a little bit about your background in academia, because we talked a little bit about this. You've talked a little bit about this on different podcasts over the months and years, and I'm interested to hear your take on it, about your history, what you've studied, why you studied it, what you hoped to do. Whether you wanted to work in academia or if that became kind of like an impossible goal due to crushing neoliberalism and accelerating exploitation of the working class, or what. So yeah, tell us a little bit about your background in academia. I'm gonna run to the bathroom. I'll be like 30 seconds and then I will be back. Is that okay?
Sure. Do you just want me to keep talking while you're gone?
Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine.
It seems kind of rude. It feels like I'm putting
Oh
the
no,
phone
it's totally
down.
fine. I can talk to your
Look,
chat. I'm staring at your chat right now.
if you
So
want to, yeah, if you want to just like vibe with the chat for 30 seconds,
I'm
that might.
totally down to vibe with the chat. Chat, ask me questions too.
That's
So
way better. Just vibe with the chat, have some fun, and 30
cool.
seconds, then we'll talk
See you in a
academia.
sec.
Talk to you then.
Oh man. Chat, how's it going? Sup? Say hello. Hello. How are you? Swell. I'm good. I am not in the IWW GDC. There used to be a GDC that was local to Omaha, but they don't have they kind of fell away. Attendance kind of fell away. I don't have any too much experience with the GDC, so you know, I wouldn't be the best person to ask. Yeah. Um, Neoliberalism crushed my dreams of being in academia. Yeah, it crushed my dreams too. And yes, there is a lag between the chat and the streamers, I think. But yeah, I had quite an experience in academia talking about it. So.
We are back. How are you?
Hi, what's your name? Who are you? You don't look like Mel.
What?
Hey, I look like Mel.
You look 100% like a male. What? Who's saying this shit? Oh, I will say,
Clearly,
you're clearly
no
a
one
male.
has seen how I did my reporting this summer. I just, put all my hair back. That's what's up.
Yeah. David Lee's asking, is there a lag between the chat and the streamers? Yeah, there's usually about a 30-second lag, so yeah, it'll take a minute to catch up there.
A little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tiny bit.
Okay, so cool. We are back. Let's pick back up where we left off.
Talking about academia.
Academia. There's that sober mind. Let's go.
Okay. It took me 6 years to get my undergraduate degree.
Mm.
Took me a long time to finally get an undergraduate degree. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to be in journalism, then I wanted to be in English, then I wanted to do philosophy, and then I wanted to do creative writing, but I don't know. So.
Oh shit! I wanted to do creative writing for a while. I was in English as well, so I am so sorry for your.
No, it's all good. I took a lot. I took a lot of creative writing classes, and I took a lot of television writing classes. I kind of wanted to get into screenwriting before I became extremely political. So, by the time that I graduated in 2016 with an undergraduate degree, it was kind of like a modge podge of credits. I don't know. Started copywriting, which was god awful.
Did you
I don't
recommend
freelance?
It was like a freelance thing. You like worked on like Upwork, Fiverr.
No, I worked in an office writing product copy, like product descriptions for power tools.
Right.
And my office, okay, if you can imagine this is why I went to grad school, actually. Okay. So I was working in this office. It was a desk with a carpet cubicle. The cubicle was beige. The top of the desk was the exact same shade of beige. The walls were beige. Okay. The ceiling, beige, in this warehouse office. And I would stand up and like peek over my office desk and see like,
beige.
like 20 yards
More
away.
Beige. Beige people.
A single fucking window. A single window.
Beige land outside.
Oh my God. I woke up. I woke up from a trance at my desk one day. This was like maybe like a week before the graduate semester was supposed to start, right? I woke up from a trance at my desk one day and I went, fuck no. And immediately just like dropped everything, applied to grad school at my local university that I had graduated from a couple of years back.
Oh, shit.
Got into grad school and immediately started grad school and quit my job the next day.
Fuck. That's
Yeah, I was
intense.
like, there's no fucking way that I can do this. Like, I just can't do this anymore, you know?
Yeah.
I immediately regretted it. Grad school is not fun. Um,
What
the
can I
research
ask? Can I ask just because when you say grad school, that like in Ireland, that could mean master studies.
it's a
That could mean
master's. Yeah,
master
it's a master's
studies.
degree. Yeah.
Right, 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 right.
I'm getting a master's degree in English literature with a special focus in post-colonial Scottish literature.
Based.
So, yeah. So my master's thesis is actually about I'm writing about a specific trope of the Scottish Highlander. It's a cultural trope that's kind of filtered its way into literature and actually is part of the reason why you always see angry Scots always drunk on TV
Mm,
is part of this sort of like cultural assassination of the Highlander
right.
figure in literature. It's really interesting. I could talk about this for hours,
No, yeah,
honestly.
no. I mean,
I don't know if we want to get into it.
well, I mean, it's
But
interesting. I mean, you see the same thing kind of like with like Irish people as well. Like, I mean, there's like these pictures from like the 1800s and like the early 1900s and stuff like that, like in London and in the United States, where Irish people were presented as though like we were just like these drunken, and actually they would use orangutans to sort of like
savages,
represent us
yeah.
savages. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of associated with this kind of like Celtic, like subhuman kind of character, and you know, as you said, it's this kind of a cultural assassination, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah, and it's particularly fascinating in Scotland because you know you have this sort of like mix of you know a Gaelic culture which is you know the Highlands, right, and then you have
Mm,
this sort of Anglo-Saxon culture or you know the Anglo culture that is the Lowlands, and it's not like a one-to-one split in the country, right, but the closer you get to the English border the more anglicized you become, and culturally speaking post the uprising, the rebellion of 1745, the crushed rebellion, you
mm,
saw what was essentially a generational shift where the crackdown post rebellion removed the Highlanders' ability to carry weapons. They couldn't wear their tartan. You know, they were discouraged from speaking the language. Right.
mm.
So these things, you know, and a generation passed from 1745 to roughly around 17 or 1805 roughly. So you have a full generation of people who have um, not had that same sort of cultural indoctrination that you normally get from your family, right?
Mm.
And so when folks like Sir Walter Scott and oh my God, the Bard of Scotland, Robert Burns, Jesus Christ, Robert Burns, start really trying to pick up and really lobby for this sort of move back towards a tradition of Scottish culture. Um, you know,
Mm.
it was difficult, right? This is kind of the same thing that you talk about a lot in sort of post-colonial societies is that you're so far removed from the original sort of cultural markers that are colonized by the fucking English and sort
Fuck.
of ripped to shred. Excuse me. Ripped to shreds by the English, right? That
Oh
you
yeah.
you have to begin again. You have to ask a question of what do you want to be.
Yeah.
So that's why you have this sort of real interesting sort of cultural phenomenon that happens in Scotland in terms of the language, the way that tartan is used, the concept of kilts, the Highland games. All of these things are sort of newer reconstructions of an older um, culture, right?
Mm.
What that looks like is the Scottish Highlander in this book, you know, in Waverly and the like, right, becomes a cultural trope. He's sort of soft-spoken, mystical. He's rugged around the edges. He's a fighter, right, and he's a rescuer. And the interesting thing about this is you can talk about the Highlander in this way because you've essentially ripped out his teeth, right? You
Mm.
defang the Highlander who was the aggressor against England um, during the rebellion of 1745, which was almost successful. The Scots made it into England. They could have marched all the way to London,
Mm.
right? Um, and the Jacobites would have fucking likely won. They had popular support, The problem is that their de facto leader, Bonnie Prince Charlie, wasn't the best tactician,
Yeah.
and so they got crushed. And so you have these really scary sort of aggressors who are seriously destroyed by the English. Um, their weapons are removed from them. They're defanged entirely, right? You wait a little bit longer, and then suddenly the savages can now be romanticized because they no longer exist in the form that they existed in. And so now it's
Mm.
like, do you remember when, and like again, someone in your chat was talking about the Highland clearances. Like these folks are being moved off of their land. They are being forcibly sent elsewhere. There is yeah, Sir Walter Scott, the guy who invented nearly all of the Scottish cliches. I guarantee you that man was not trying to do that, but that's what ended up happening. But like, so you have this interesting sort of cultural phenomenon happening, and it's really interesting to see how that's sort of filtered through the intervening centuries, all the way up until what's that one British show, Bodyguard?
I'm not
You know what
familiar
I'm
with that.
talking about?
I'm not familiar with
It's a
that one,
Netflix.
no.
It's a Netflix show.
It's not the Crown or anything like that, is it? That's a big one that people are talking about at the
It's
moment.
it's got what's his name? I think he's a Scottish actor. He was in Game of Thrones. I don't know. But the main character is a guy, a bodyguard, Scottish, Afghan war vet with a drinking problem and a chip on his shoulder, who then becomes the patsy for an anti-government conspiracy
Mm.
in the show.
Mm.
And he has to fight his way out, essentially. So, like the same tropes, or you think about something a little bit more maybe in the pub. Yes, Rob Stark, Richard McAdam. Yeah, Richard Madden. Thank you. God, well, I forgot his name.
I
You
know
also
Rob
think about
Stark,
like
I
the
do.
Outlander series. Yeah, you think about the Outlander series, which is similar sort of tropes, right? There's actually in erotic fiction, there is a subgenre of erotic fiction that is the Scottish Highlander, the ripped savage Scottish Highlander, who
Class.
is this scary motherfucker. Mel's thoughts on Outlander is that I loved the books and it actually got me into this research, but then I hated the direction that the author took him. I think that she uses rape as a plot device, and I think that sucks. So I stopped reading them. And the TV series was really triggering for a lot of people because it featured a slave getting lynched. So we just don't talk about Outlander that much anymore. But again, these tropes are still there, right? And you can
Mm.
see like an actual through line all the way,
Mm.
um, from the start of my research to the where we sit now in popular culture. And see, I could talk about this for a while.
No, it's really
Like
interesting.
I could talk. It's really interesting because if you look at it from a post-colonial perspective, the thing about post-colonial theory as it relates to Scotland is that um, uh, scholars are really divided on whether or not you could call Scotland a colonized society,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because what you have is a portion of the population who is perhaps internally colonized.
Mm.
I don't know how to explain that.
Well, no,
But
you're right. There's a class divide. I mean, there's like the bourgeoisie of Scotland, or at least the ruling class of Scotland at that time, if not bourgeoisie. The
Mhm.
ruling class definitely paired up with the British. I mean, and they became part of this larger British identity. But the working
Right,
classes,
Lowland Scots for sure. Lowland Scots for sure participated in the project of empire and
yeah,
made their money off of it.
mm, mm,
Um, and were active in a lot of projects that sort of helped build the empire in the quote unquote new world in South America, right?
yeah.
So there, you have this really uh, unique situation where you have and perhaps I mean you could potentially sort of divide it along ethnic lines. You've got the Highland Scots, which are a Celtic sort of group of people who are generally um the Gallic speaking, right? The
Mm,
sort of they belong to the Celtic fringe, right?
mm.
And they've always been sort of viewed as these militaristic sort of cannon fodder, right?
Yeah.
Fighters. cattle
Yeah.
stealers, a
Yeah.
lot of Lowland Scots actually wrote a lot of literature on the quote unquote savagery of Highlanders, and they transported that to the New World and used the same rhetoric to describe the Native Americans in the United States.
Right. Okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Colonial
That's
US.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So there's some really interesting sort of research about that,
Yeah, that's
about
cool.
how these sort of ideas travel. Again, sorry,
No, no, it's
I
really
could talk
interesting.
about this for
Don't.
days.
No, it's really cool.
Yeah.
But it does strike me. There's one thing that really strikes me as you're talking about this, and I think that it's really interesting. The level of intricacy that you're sort of describing right here. It's one thing that I noticed as well when I was doing my own postgraduate studies. They require, and I think this is kind of systemic. I mean, it's kind of part of, unfortunately, the neoliberalized version of academia, where they require you to have something that's new and marketable, and like you can't just study the general area of English or whatever it might be. Like you can't, you need to be very,
Right.
very specific. You need to get into post-colonial studies, and it's not enough. You can't just do a master's in post-colonial studies. It's post-colonial studies as applied to Scotland, but not only in Scotland, but as applied to this particular class within Scotland, and not only this particular class within Scotland, but this particular class during this particular period in Scotland. And it's really, really precise, the level of detail that needs to be gotten into in order to, I suppose, in a way, legitimize the kind of academic work that you're doing. And that's one thing that kind of pushed me away from academia, because I think when you're talking about this, I think it's so fascinating how you're describing like the Gaelic struggle within Scotland, and I immediately want to link that to the struggle in Ireland. The post-colonial, like, and I don't think there's any real debate about the struggle, like the colonial
I
nature of
I really
Ireland.
I think they're interconnected, right?
Absolutely,
I really
yeah,
do. And
but
we could have a long chat about that.
for like decades probably. But
Yeah.
the thing
Yeah.
is, the thing is, like within this academic framework, unfortunately, it's extremely difficult to allow for that kind of connection there. Because
Oh
they,
yeah, there's like it's this sort of like sub specialization along specialization along,
yes,
it's this
exactly.
you really have
I
to,
hated that.
it's difficult. It's really, and I've had similar problems because in the United States there is exactly three, two, two PhD programs, one that is specific to Scottish literature.
Mm,
So exactly one that I could potentially be in, like-minded company, right?
mm,
I've always been sort of an outlier, having to take mostly Irish literature classes, and various other classes, or build my own research classes in order to be able to draw those through lines, right?
mm.
And you always feel sort of there's not a lot of connection there. And I think to we got off on a giant tangent. To bring it back to just the condition of academia in
Yeah.
in the world, right? Particularly neoliberal institutions. Like, I think the biggest thing that I realized in my master's program, something that I just didn't pay attention to in my undergraduate, is that the institution, the academy, whatever you want to call it, is just a giant money laundering scheme.
So much, yes. Jesus
You
fucking
know, it's
Christ. Did that
about
turn you cynical? Did you go to the dark
oh,
side as a result of that?
no, for sure. Oh, for sure, because it's this idea of, you pay for access and prestige, but you realize the public universities stole land, particularly in the United States, stole land from Native Americans. It's this giant sort of land grab, money laundering sort of scam. It's a racket,
Yes.
right?
The same in Ireland, by the
And
way.
what
Exact same.
Yeah, and so, and it continues to expand. Like, all you have to do is look at the University of Nebraska Medical Center and see how many neighborhoods they've bulldozed in order to expand their campus, right? Working class neighborhoods have been
Mm,
completely uh, raised so that they can build new research facilities and all this other stuff. And they have tons of money, federal funds, state funds, tuition, tons, right?
mm,
And they do it in the name of research and knowledge production, right?
mm.
But on the other hand, you have these programs like at the University of Nebraska Omaha, which is where I go to school, where you have just recently the university received a multi-million dollar grant to build a terrorism research center, counterterrorism research,
Right, right.
focusing on domestic terrorism
Yeah.
in the middle of the country, where we
Domestic
don't have a fusion
terrorism.
center.
Okay. So like far
Yeah.
right. I mean,
So
because it's basically like almost
could
exclusively
be
far
it
right
could
terrorism.
it could be. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like. What we do know is that the federal government, particularly Joint Terrorism Task Force, has reached itself into our city a little bit more, you know. And
Oh,
so you see how these universities are sort of propping up the arms of the state and
yeah.
creating deeper surveillance in the communities that they operate. And you have this sort of this push for knowledge building, but really it's about power,
Mm.
right? It's about power and money. And,
As everything
the
is, unfortunately.
yeah, and the academy is no different. And I think the big thing that kind of, because I was like, I really like this research. I want to have access to these libraries. I want to be able to continue to do the work that I'm doing. I think it's really exciting. It's, especially in the field that I'm in, it's a fairly new field. It's only about, 40 years old, which is
Mm.
pretty new in the grand
Yeah,
scheme of things.
definitely.
And there's a lot of work to be done, and I wanted to go to grad school and get my PhD. And then the pandemic hit,
Oof.
and I'm finishing up my master's degree. This is my last semester, but last year, the academic shock doctrine was really demoralizing, right? Because
Yeah.
what we saw universities closing their campuses but not offering any sort of remuneration for on-campus workers or janitors. Those folks, they got laid off.
That's right.
They were forced to work. They got less pay. University instructors who are already living a precarious life without having, they're not full-time, they're adjunct. They also got furloughed, or their sections were taken away from them, so they couldn't make money. Then they instituted hiring freezes, and then they said we're not gonna raise your pay for 2 years, and so it's just been this like cascading domino effect in the
Jesus.
American universities, um, where now they're not accepting as many people into PhD programs, so they're lowering their class sizes.
Mm.
So I'm sitting here like white knuckling it, going, oh my God, it's oh my God, okay. There's no job market left. Like
Yeah.
there's nowhere else that I can, I'm gonna get my master's degree. I'm gonna spend 5 years in a PhD program, which may or may not be paid for.
Mm.
And I'm gonna come out $150,000 in debt and not have a job
Jesus
and be
fuck.
precarious for the next 15 years. I don't want to do that. I don't want to put myself through that,
Jesus.
you
That's
know?
so fucked up.
And like as the semester has gone on over the last 6 months, PhD applications were due on December 15th of last year. I got about halfway through the summer and I was like, I don't even have the mental headspace to get through the next semester. I don't have the mental headspace to go through a whole application process, pay hundreds of dollars to do it. Like, I just don't have the money. I just can't
Mm.
do it.
Oh fucking hell.
And then I
I
started
know the feeling.
broadcasting.
I know, no,
Yeah,
genuinely.
it's like,
I
okay,
really, as like another like working class person, like I really understand the frustration that you have because I really wanted to do a PhD and pursue this academic paths, but I couldn't. It was not a possibility to me because I couldn't afford to spend 6 grand in Ireland. It's €6,000 per year to pay this. It's not, obviously not like 150 thousand
right.
dollars like it is in the US, but it's like €6,000 per year, and you can't work when you're doing that. So like, how the fuck am I gonna pay for housing, for like electricity, for like gas, for and like how am I gonna pay for food? Like, what am I supposed to do? I mean, you might get like
Yeah,
€20 per week to tutor a particular class or something like that, but
right.
it's just not viable. Like, how we can't make this work. It's not possible. It's interesting that you said that they're bringing in less PhD students, because unfortunately in Ireland, because as we were saying earlier, it's become such a racket that there are so many people with PhDs now that
Mhm.
having a PhD doesn't mean you're getting a job. Like, no fucking way. Like, just because you have a PhD doesn't mean shit. You need a PhD plus
Right.
postgraduate studies. You know, a couple of years here, some volunteer work, some extra this, some that, some
Well,
like
it's like you may end up being overqualified. They don't want to pay you because you're
yes,
overqualified. So they'll find
exactly.
someone who's not as qualified,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And like, you know, it's it's a gamble either way. And,
Yeah.
you know, I don't want to discount what has also been probably one of the best organizing years for graduate student workers in the last couple of years, because 2019, 2020 was fantastic for student unions
Mm.
and securing work protections from within the university.
Oh, it's good to hear.
Um, yeah, but you know, it's just I remember sitting, I think this was like, I don't know, probably back in August, where I was like looking through all of the stuff because I had already started figuring out PhD programs and stuff. And I just remember sitting there going, I don't think I can do this, you know.
Mm.
And it was one of those moments where, you know, because you've been in postgraduate work, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you be being an academic becomes a part of you. You know,
Sure.
you're
Yeah.
doing the
Yeah.
research that you're doing becomes a part of your identity in a lot of ways, and you feel like you've let yourself down. And maybe that's actually a comment on how fucking toxic academia is. That
Absolutely.
like if you decide to leave it, it feels like you're breaking up with something. You know,
Mm.
um, and it was not a decision that I made lightly. You know, this is a life altering career decision, and I'm grateful that I get to you know, finish this degree. Kind of, I'm stressed out, but it's the sunk
Oh, the
cost
feeling.
fallacy at this point. I'm literally a semester away. I might as well just finish. You know,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have a responsibility to my students who I'm going to be teaching to. So you know,
Mm.
just got to make sure that I'm not leaving them high and dry this semester, and I think I'll be fine.
Oh, that feeling of obligation that you have to like students and stuff like that, the capitalists fucking love that. Whether they're state capitalists or whether they're privateer capitalists, they fucking love that shit. They love that sense of obligation. They love that sense of purpose that we have as teachers that makes us stay an hour after finishing work or after the class or lecture or tutorial or whatever it might
Oh
be.
yeah,
They fucking
how many
thrive.
unpaid hours?
Oh, gee,
Oh my god.
at least double whatever your weekly hour is. Like whatever, if you're working 20 hours a week, 30 hours a week, 40 hours a week, double that is the out of hours work. I
Mhm.
mean, absolutely, like 100%. Like between like correcting papers, between lesson planning, between
Oh my god. It's a nightmare.
homework, between like
And we just
everything.
like accept that as part of it,
Just
you know,
normal. It's
which
part of
is
it.
just wild.
Being part of the life
Yeah.
in schools or in universities or wherever it might be, just being part of it, you know, like going to events and being sort of someone who's there. I mean, there's so much shit you're expected to do. And I don't know how it is in Ireland anyway. I can only really speak for Ireland. The teachers, the university lecturers, whether they're adjuncts or whatever it might be, on paper it looks like they're paid quite well. It looks like they're getting kind of, you know, sort of, you know, what we would traditionally consider like middle class kind of salaries. You
Mhm.
know, they might, it looks like they're kind of starting out on like 37,000 euro per year. In dollars, I think that's probably around 29, $30,000, something like that. But the thing is, that's assuming you can get onto a full time permanent contract. And the reality is that nobody has those. Everybody has like part time, half time contracts where they're doing like
Yep.
between 15 and 20 hours. So they're like on half of
Right.
that, which is less than minimum wage. So they can't pay their rent. You know? They can't pay for shit. You know? So
Yeah, I mean, it's like
it's
it's the same
fucked.
shit here. It's probably one of the most illuminating and radicalizing personally moments of my life in the last couple of years is listening to a department head tell the graduate students that you know, at least you get health insurance. Our adjunct professors don't get a third section because then the department needs to pay for their health insurance.
Mm. Jesus.
So they don't get offered more than two sections, which is about $2,500 to $5,000 for a 6-month contract.
For fuck's sake. I don't know.
You know,
Maybe in some places that's
these
enough,
people are
but
working at multiple universities, at community colleges, just to cobble together enough money to pay for their families.
that's so crazy.
And they don't get health insurance because we don't have a national health service here.
Fucking
Great.
hell. Hey, on the
Love to
National
live in
Health
the United.
Service. On that particular question of the of the National Health Service in the US, how does it work? Like if you go into a hospital, and I don't know,
There
fuck,
isn't one. It's not a single payer system. So what you need in order, okay, so most hospitals are private,
right?
very many publicly owned hospitals, if at all,
Mm.
which means they are run by a corporation. Hi, Kyle. Hello. Kyle, strap in. We're talking about the health
Is
insurance
Kyle
in the
here?
United States. Yeah,
Oh,
Kyle's in the
Labor
chat.
Kyle! Great to see you, comrade. How are you? Good to see you. Fucking legend. I love, I love Kyle so much. Those Final Fantasy videos, mwah, chef's kiss.
Okay.
Absolutely fantastic.
Okay. All right. So essentially, so what it is a network of hospitals, most of them somewhat privately owned. Say, for example, okay, how can I explain this in the best terms? Okay. So once you turn 26, you are no longer allowed to stay on your parents' health insurance, which usually your parents can get health insurance through their jobs. For me,
Is that private?
it it's private health insurance usually. Yeah, they're
Okay.
corporations that give you health insurance. You pay a monthly premium, so it's usually anywhere from 50 to fucking $1,500 a month, depending on who you talk to and what your conditions
Jesus.
are, right? And what they do is they guarantee that you will have a portion covered. Um, the private health insurance usually has a deductible, which is anywhere from $2,000 to $16,000. What that means is before the health insurance kicks in and starts paying a portion of your medical costs, you have to pay a certain money amount of money out of pocket. So if I pay
Oof.
$50 a month for a $2,000 deductible, I have to pay $2,000 in medical costs before it starts getting covered by the insurance. And once the insurance kicks in, they will cover
Jesus.
60%. So if I go to the hospital, because I got in a car accident, obviously it's a traumatic experience.
Mm.
Usually they won't like turn you away at the door necessarily, right?
Mm.
But so I would pay, say it's the bill's probably going to be roughly $150,000 if I spend a week in a hospital, and all of the itemized sort of things that happen, right?
Mm.
So $2,000 of that comes immediately out of my pocket. Then the insurance will take a look at it and go line by line and say, well, we can cover 70% of this, 70% of that. Nah, that's actually elective. We don't need to cover this. We don't need to cover that. But we'll cover 70% of this. And so they may end up paying for, I don't know, $60,000 of your $150,000 bill. So so then you're on the hook for
Fucking hell.
$1,000 and they just fucking send it straight to you.
Is anybody not in debt in the United States of America?
No,
For
rich people.
fuck's sake.
So, for me, I have grad student insurance, right?
Mm.
Yeah, because I'm a grad student at UNO, I get to, I pay $1,500 a semester for about 6 months worth of insurance. And it covers a portion of my prescriptions, which I take prescriptions every day.
Mm.
Um, and if I didn't have health insurance, it would cost me anywhere from $300 to $600 a month to fill my prescriptions. I pay
Oof.
$30 right now. When I graduate in May, I will have about 2 months left of my insurance, and then I don't have insurance. So I have to find insurance. And the Obamacare like marketplace, I just recently went through it. Potentially going to cost me anywhere from $200 to $500 a month to cover myself enough to cover my prescriptions.
Hey, pals in the chat there, if you want to help out a comrade, Mel, you'll find the link to Comrade Mel's Patreon in the description box below. Please do go ahead and
My
support our
hope,
comrade
yeah,
there
my
because
hope
this is
is
just
that
a
my financial
fucked
situation
situation.
is enough to get me on the marketplace, and
Fucking
get
hell.
on to an insurance policy that'll give me enough to cover my bills. Otherwise, there's coupons for prescriptions, which again, so the case for Medicare for all, really, for a single payer system is plain as fucking day. Right?
Mm.
It's plain as day, right? You have to think like most of the arguments against a single payer national health system in this country are actually arguments that are outlining what already happens. Well, you're going to have to wait 8 months to get a routine checkup is a really big one, right?
Mm.
Your lines are going to be too long. Like you're going to spend 6 hours in the emergency room before you can see someone. Let me tell you right now, my friend, I had someone close to me who was literally dying of sepsis, sitting in a hotel in a hospital waiting room for 5 hours before they saw her.
Fucking hell.
We walked in through the front door, right? So we
Whew.
waited 5 hours before she saw someone. She almost died. Okay.
Oh, she's
Let's see
okay.
what else. Finally, the bills are a little high, but yeah, she's fine. But
Oh,
like
okay, great, great
long
to hear
wait
that.
time.
Anyway.
Here it is. Let's see what else. You're not going to be able to get your medication fast enough. Folks are rationing their insulin because they can't get their medication fast enough because it costs too much, right? Or you have to wait months and months to see someone. The wait time to see any sort of specialist in this country is already months and months, right? None of it's streamlined.
Mm.
If you switch from one hospital to another hospital, those records may not make it to the other hospital, right? If
Mm.
you have to make sure that the doctor that you see is in network with your insurance. Otherwise, you pay out of pocket way more money, fully covered by your insurance, and there's no sort of like efficient process to figuring this out. You just kind of get surprised with the bill if you don't do your research fast enough, right? So like all of these things that folks are like, well, and you think about like insurance companies give hospitals an incentive to overcharge their patients. So a bag of saline can cost $2,000
Mm.
of it for 5 cents a pop.
Unbelievable.
you know so because they're going to get paid out through the insurance company, but the insurance company is constantly doing this cost value analysis to determine how much money they really want to pay. And so like
Oh,
especially with COVID,
Jesus.
folks are like afraid to take an ambulance to the hospital when they're dying of COVID because they can't afford the private ambulance service because it costs $2,500 for a 10-minute trip.
What the fuck? How did we get here? How did we get here,
uh,
Mel?
I don't know.
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
I love this in the chat. Nearly half of all American adults are uninsured or underinsured. It's 46% of US adults. 84 million people remain uninsured. One of my friends couldn't afford the insurance and he got in a car accident, and now he's got a $160,000 hospital bill because he was uninsured in the hospital.
Jesus.
They saved his life,
Oh,
but now he's got to
good.
stare at that.
Jesus, like
You
the
know,
rest of his life is just fucked.
we're all in debt. All of us are in debt. I mean,
Yeah.
fuck, we could go on about this shit. It's wild. It is
Mm.
wild that we live in this country that claims to be the richest country in the world, and fucking almost all of us are in
Poor.
poverty.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can manage to stay in our apartments, but we'll never be able to own a house because we can't afford
Jesus.
it because our credit is shot because we've got $60,000 in debt.
Yeah.
I'm a my student loans, I'm $105,000 in debt right now.
Jesus. Imagine if you got a
We're gonna
house as well. If you got a house, then you're what? I don't know how much a house costs. What's a house cost in the US? Like
I don't
300,
uh
400?
it, I can't get a house because my credit isn't good enough
100?
because my debt to income ratio is too high.
Jesus.
So they won't even give me a loan for a house. I can't buy one. I'll be renting for the rest of my life.
Fucking hell.
Mhm.
That's bleak. The
Mhm.
American dream, eh?
The American dream is dead. It has been dead for a long time. It's
Fucking
always nice to be able to hang out with other radicals who are also radicalized by this bullshit experience and be able to
hell.
try and think of ways to move forward.
Yeah. Full communism. Right. Tomorrow.
Yeah,
Please.
fucking tomorrow, dude. Fuck.
Stateless
That would be
classless society. Stateless classless moneyless society. No no compromises. Let's go.
let's go for it. God, that would be amazing. Would be fucking amazing. Anyway, so yeah, so
So
sorry
yeah.
to bring down the chat with that one. Wow.
No, it was great. It was really interesting. It was really cool to hear and very insightful as well. And sad as it's sad to hear. But like, fucking hell. I mean, it's Mel. You are a light skinned person in the United States of America. The quintessential. The quintessence of privilege in this world, and how fucking difficult is it for you? It's ridiculous. It's fucking, this system
Right.
is, we can't keep
So you
going.
can can imagine how the system hammers down on folks who have less apparent privilege than I do,
Yeah. Yeah,
you know,
exactly, exactly.
uh, and constantly, you know, uh, getting killed for sitting in the back seat of a car during a traffic stop.
Jesus fuck.
Happened in Omaha, the end of November. Kenneth Jones, 35-year-old father, sitting in the back seat of a car during a traffic stop, and he was shot by cops. The time from when the cops got out of the car to when he was dead on the ground outside the car was 67 seconds.
Jesus Christ. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
This is the country that I live in, and it's almost maddening, right? It is maddening to think about how, the disease of American exceptionalism
Mm.
has invaded every person's brain, where we can still say that we are the greatest country in the world, but if you just opened your eyes and looked out the fucking window, you would see that it is not,
Yeah.
and that it never has been, that it has been a settler colonial state that was built on and maintained by white supremacy,
Yes.
that up until the 1960s was a de facto apartheid society,
Mm.
and still is in many ways. The institutions have not recovered from that,
Mm.
and still perpetuate systemic racism across the board.
Mm.
And you know, uh, all these patriots
What are they upholding?
in America, who stormed the Capitol to say this is not our American society. Yes, it fucking is.
It's
First off,
exactly
Joe
what
Biden
it
saying
is.
this is not the America that we know. Yes, it is. First off, second off, all of those folks storming the Capitol are terrified of losing their white supremacist way of life.
Mm.
You know, and you can see clearly that the state in ways tacitly sides with these groups, which is
Yeah.
why they didn't get bludgeoned on the steps of the Capitol,
Mm.
right? They didn't get tear gassed as they were standing on the line on the lawn. BLM protesters were blocks away from the Capitol grounds and were just destroyed by the police.
Mm.
Because they're fighting for racial justice, right?
Mm.
The difference here, I think, here's the point. Soapbox again, you can ask another question. Um, but here's the thing. And I talked about this on a Twitch stream with my friend Dwight, who's a fantastic human being. And we were talking about the disparity in treatment. The thing that Black Lives Matter, social justice, racial justice protesters over the last 6 months have shown is that they present a credible threat to the state and the hegemony that the state enjoys. Right?
Yes.
These far right Trump folks who are now being painted as insurrectionists because they made it through the front doors. Right? Um, Supporters of the state. They are pro-establishment. They are pro status quo, right?
Absolutely.
They want the status quo to be the same. So the ruling class is not going to treat them the same. Anti-racist Black Lives Matter folks,
Mm.
right? These activists who were bludgeoned by the cops, right? Because these are fundamentally, in many ways, pro-police,
Absolutely. They're
right?
militant
Until they start
establishist. you know?
and until they start swinging on the police, and the police are like, "Fuck no, we're not gonna do this,"
Yeah.
and then they start presenting a threat to the sort of police institution at that moment, not necessarily as a whole, right? Um, and so you're gonna see a disparity in charging. Like, there are some anarchists who, were, arrested for relatively minor things, the rest of their lives in jail.
Mm.
And you're going to have a lot of these pro Trump folks who literally are on video, punching cops. My guess is they'll probably spend
A
in
couple of
jail.
days.
If
Who
that.
cares? They'll get out. They'll get out on bail. It's no big deal for them.
Well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens. A lot of them might end up in jail for a significant period of time, but we're just going to see the system working as it's intended.
Mm.
Don't actually present a threat. Tacitly support the upholding of the ruling class, the oligarchs, or whoever else you want to say
Yeah.
run this country. And folks like you and me, living in fear of whether or not someone's going to show up and disappear me in the middle of the night,
Fucking hell.
for inflammatory speech.
It's a really good.
That's a little hyperbolic, but you know what I mean. You
No, I
know?
do know what you, I mean. Like we say, we joke about that now, but let's see where we are in 10 years. You know, I mean, maybe it's not so much a joke in 2030, 2031. You know, it's a big problem that we on the left have in particular is to not understand the class character of these protests, of these uprisings, of these movements. As you know all too well yourself, the George Floyd uprising was not perpetuated by these people. This is a
Yeah,
very,
thoroughly working class
that's right, yeah.
uprising was the George Floyd
Whereas
uprising. These are oppressed
this one,
communities reacting emotionally, passionately, with anger, righteous anger, right?
yeah,
The general makeup that I'm seeing on social media in the last couple of days is these are folks who flew there in private jets.
yep,
They're small business tyrants, as you will, the petit
exactly,
bourgeoisie, if you want to call it
yeah.
that. You've got business owners, these types of people who have the ability to take time off of work and pay for it.
That's right. That's such a good point because more normal working class people can't afford to go and do this. They can't afford to take time
No,
out of their afternoon to go and
yeah,
storm the Capitol. That's not an
they
option.
can't afford the hotel. I mean, you have
Yeah.
to remember how freaking massive the United States is,
Yeah.
right? To put it in perspective, you can drive from Edinburgh to the west coast of Scotland in about 8 hours.
Hmm.
That's from one side to the
By
other
the
side.
way, one side of Ireland to the other side takes 3.5 hours. So,
Okay, for me, I'm pretty much, like, smack dab in the middle of the country.
hmm,
For me to drive to the East Coast, it takes me,
3 days.
if I were driving consistently, 36 hours.
Jesus.
No, if I were driving and not stopping, it would be
Fuck.
15 to 18 hours. If I wanna drive from coast to coast, it'll take me at least a couple of days.
Fucking hell.
Yeah,
I can't even imagine. Literally
it's
can't even
huge.
imagine that.
Yeah, y I can the God bless him. One of my friends, when I was in Scotland, he was driving me around to the up the Highlands,
It'll
and the
take
road trip
hour.
was like,
It'll be a really long drive. It's 40 minutes.
yeah, the drive was like 4 hours up into the Highlands from Glasgow or something.
Hmm.
I mean, we landed in Inverness, and he's like, "Fuck, I'm tired." And I'm like, "Dude, it takes me 8 hours to leave my own state, driving
Uh,
constantly."
it's the same. My wife is from Brazil, and it's the exact same thing. Brazil is massive. It's basically like a continent in and of itself, and so it
Mhm.
takes like they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go hang out with my pal today. It's just like a 2 hour drive, no big deal, no biggie. It's cool. I'm like a 2 hour
Yeah.
drive. That's like you prepare for that for months. What are you talking about?
Yeah, right.
Just a 2 hour drive.
I mean, like, to put it this way, this country is big enough that I have planned, like, multi-week road trips that, crisscross across the country, like 5 or 6,000 miles, multi-week road trips that, like, I could take that route and then go back from coast to coast and not hit any of the same spots twice. It's huge. It's
Jesus
massive.
fucking
So and,
Christ.
flights from one side of the country to the other side of the country, especially during, the post New Year's travel, as much as, people should be staying home, are not, they're expensive. They're expensive flights there and back, plus hotels, plus all of the travel and everything else. And so, you've got the folks who are just kind of like, fuck it. It's the middle of the week. I don't have work, and like chartering private jets to go. Business owners, these assholes. Most of the people who are getting arrested are
Storm the
like business
Capitol.
owners. They're like legislators. They are one guy owns a tattoo shop, another guy is like a financial analyst. Like these are folks that are, they can afford to do this.
Jesus.
And they did.
Yeah.
Now they're crying about it because, you reap what you sow,
Mm.
assholes. Like, you can't just be an out and out fascist and storm the Capitol and not face consequences.
Well, let's see.
Fuck.
Let's see. Let's see, Mel. Fucking hell. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's see what
Yeah.
I suppose the fallout from this happens to be.
We'll see what happens. I mean, I honestly I can't make any predictions about what's gonna happen. I'm just gonna be kind of like analyzing as it comes because it's there's too many. it feels like there's too many moving parts. I don't know.
Mm.
Maybe Kyle in the chat there has some insight too, because it's just like, how do you even process what the fuck happened?
Oh,
You can't.
it's impossible.
Like it's and the news that
It's
keeps coming out is just like back to back to back. You've got resignations, you've got invoking the 25th, you've got all of these like impeachment talks, and you've got like, okay, so now we've got resignations from the Capitol Police because they fucked up. And then we have to think about what was stolen from the Capitol, which is a huge security risk. We have like IEDs that were placed on timers underneath like cars outside of both the RNC and the DNC. You've got all this shit that's just like
oof.
wild. You've got folks who showed up that were ready to take hostages and like occupy the building. You've
Mm.
got folks who showed up who were just, just wanting violence and stealing stuff from
Mm.
the situation is like rapidly changed so much that like I don't even really know where
It's
to set down in it.
it's so crazy to me, like when I think about
Nuts.
this, like how unorganized it all was, and yet they fucking made it happen. And like we can't on the left.
Well,
At least not to that same level. Well, I suppose at least we aren't allowed to make it, escalate to that
I
level.
yeah, well, I would push back a little bit on that because we did have at least in the United States, there was one of the longest continuous sustained uprisings across the country over
Mm,
the summer, um, and it's still going in many cities.
mm. It's kind of fizzling though. Like it's kind of like the yellow vest, isn't it? Where it doesn't necessarily have like a clear end goal, so it's kind of just like an uprising, a massive protest, but without like a clear trajectory of like here's what we're planning on doing, and like here's our intention, and we're actually going to seize state power, or we're going to do this or that or whatever it might be. Without that, it's kind of just, it seems to be that it's just fallen into the yellow vests thing, where it's just protesting for the sake of protesting because people are so upset, and righteously and rightly so, to be furious about what's going on, but without a clear trajectory of where we're going, it's like it kind of fizzles out or something like that.
Well, I mean, I would push back a little bit on that. From my own observations and my own research of the Yellow Vest movement, there wasn't the way that they sort of set that up. And if someone in the chat is more versed, feel free to correct me. But I read a lot of French sociologists wrote a lot about the Yellow Vest movement at the end of 2019, where they had spent a lot of time examining how the movement came together and the sort of organization that was going on with the movement. Um, and really, the only major goal that they had is not necessarily that they wanted a seat at the table, because that doesn't necessarily um, improve the material conditions of the people in that country, right?
Mm,
That just, that's a concession that they didn't want to make because they did not feel that they could actually find any sort of space to really policy, right? They didn't want to engage with the neoliberal state, Macron's neoliberal state, in that way. What
mm,
started as legitimate sort of, sort of logical anger and legitimate sort of run of events regarding the energy tax, that was just sort of a culmination of like multiple years of neoliberal policies sort of failing the French people,
mm,
and making it more difficult for them to engage in society with the current material conditions. Um, and the Yellow Vest movement is sort of predicated. Sociologists have written about this since then, that it feels like that it wasn't necessarily about like you think. So it's more like, instead of thinking of like the political paradigm as being sort of a cube that you have enough like power to push forward, and you push the cube on its side, and now we have communism, right? Um, right?
the
Like
dream.
that's kind of how you think about it, right? Like the sort of paradigm shift of like political paradigm and economic paradigm shift is just having enough people behind you to push it on its side. And now we've destabilized the capitalist system, the neoliberal system, and we can bring something else. I think a lot of folks sort of tend to agree that the Yellow Vest movement was not necessarily about shifting a cube, but
Mm,
actually turning it into a sphere,
mm.
pluralism. right? This concept, and this is just something
More
that
power
kind
to
of
the
grew
people.
organically. It wasn't I yeah, I would agree that, they didn't necessarily have like concrete demands in the sense that you think of. But I don't know that they necessarily were thinking of it in that way. That
Mm,
was their goal.
mm.
That makes
That's actually
sense.
it's actually a really good
Um,
point. Yeah, yeah, because like I mean, the whole thing is about putting power back into the hands of the people rather than in the hands of, as we said earlier, like the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, oligarchs, etc., etc. So it's actually a really good way of like the people actually seizing that power. I mean, maybe it's not exactly seizing the means of
well,
production in that classical kind of like
it's
Marxist
certainly
sense, but
fluid, right? It's very fluid because it's like, okay, now you can't like court movement if is no established sort of vanguardist leadership hierarchy, right,
mm,
where these leaders who have influence across the country, right, you can't say, hey, here, have a seat at the table, oh look, you've won, you know
mm,
like they don't have the yellow vest movement never really had that sort of leadership. They certainly had for lack of a better term, like celebrities that were activists who would made a name for themselves as sort of spokespeople, but they didn't all at no point do I think, in my limited outside view, did they necessarily represent the goals of every single person in that crowd.
mm.
It was certainly the sort of thing where they were pushing back against Macron's neoliberal policies because Macron is a fucking corporate douchebag. And
Yes.
they definitely coalesced around a certain level of tactics, right?
Mm.
Effective, very effective in beating back. I mean, that's why they could show up every weekend, and they did it for what, 60 weeks, 70 weeks before the pandemic shut them down.
It was really wild, to be
Um,
honest.
cool to be, I was in Paris the week after May Day when shit went nuts in
Mm,
2019. And it was a very chill march, but there were thousands of people out there. you know and the conversations that I had with folks were very enlightening about how they viewed the movement, right?
mm.
The one thing that's very interesting about the yellow vest movement is because it was decentralized, people were worried that it was going to be taken over by fascists
Ah,
or these various outlying extremist groups.
it was in
And I
Ireland,
think
by the way,
uh yeah, I mean,
and in the UK
the
as
thing
well.
about
I know
the thing about the French is that they don't give a fuck. Like, the thing is they what they did is
they really
they
don't.
essentially they if I'm remembering this correctly, but essentially what happened is that some like Frexit, Marine Le Pen folks who were
Mm,
like, far right,
yeah.
tried to co-opt some of the messaging of the movement, and the French just fucking, the rest of the group just fucking ignored them until they went away. Because they couldn't gain a foothold in the movement. They were
Yeah.
like, "Nah, we don't want that. Sorry." Like, "Fuck off, bro." Like, "Cool. You hate Macron too? Great. Oh, you wanna do that? No.
Fuck that.
Thanks, though." So, like, and they're treated with this sort of like this sort of this sort of like, "Aw, bless your sweet summer heart." Like, "Oh, I'm sorry that like, that's what I saw. Like, well, folks just, like, okay, you wanna join the march, great, but no one's gonna listen to you if you try and hand out a pamphlet, you know?
Oh
Like,
my god, could you imagine if in the rest of the world the far right were just treated like that? They were like patted on the head, like in the most condescending way imaginable. Like,
I mean, it
you
worked for
poor
the it
little
worked
thing.
for the French, but it's definitely not working here. There has to be, like, an
Yeah,
active,
anti-fascist resistance to this kind of thing. I mean, it's
uh,
too intense.
yeah, yeah, we have to push back against it because if we don't, then we have fucking Trumpers who are storming the Capitol. But,
Yeah.
you know, um it's that, and I think probably the biggest lesson to learn from the Yellow Vest movement is that they managed to really understand mimetics in the actual symbol of
Mm,
the yellow vest, right? The
mm,
yellow vest is a universal symbol in France because you are required to keep it in your car.
mm.
Cool. You have to have a yellow vest in your car because if you have to stop for any moment, you have to put the yellow vest on as a safety feature. It's kind of like putting on a seatbelt in the United States, right? So everyone had one universal symbol of what it means to stand up against a ruling class that has no issues, right? with destroying the livelihoods of people.
Hmm.
And to the person in the chat who said something about the yellow vests in France having a big union presence, for the first portion of it, they really didn't. It wasn't until they gathered sort of like solid support that the union started stepping in. But it was not something that happened from the start. A lot of people were, you know, but then they're like occupying roundabouts, right,
Hmm.
as public spaces, right? They're doing, they're stopping people from having to pay tolls on the highways. They're occupying toll booths. All of these things that are sort of like just kind of depending on where you are. And I think also, the country is relatively small. It would be difficult to replicate that in the United States simply by the sheer size and population of it. But they had folks would take the train from Paris to Nice or something, and offer their support for a major demonstration and the way, on the way back, right?
Hmm.
So, it's like it's a very interesting sort of space.
Hmm.
Um, And I see in the chat we're talking about racist country. It sure is.
Yeah.
We talk about the yellow vest. The yellow vest is a predominantly white movement.
Even within the working
There's,
class movement, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot.
There's a serious problem of like, what we might traditionally call like labor aristocracy, like the sort of like the white sort of privileged people like within France sort of seeing a lot of people, how can I say this in a way that's acceptable? Chickens coming home to roost. I mean, obviously France has had colonies all over the world, and the people from
Mhm.
those colonies are now coming to France because they've extracted everything from them, and now it's basically the only place they can go. And there's a massive amount of discrimination and racism and chauvinism, and it's directed towards these people. It's huge. Like Algeria is an example. There's 14 countries in Africa that are paying post-colonial taxes to France, in order to keep France from maintaining their continued
Yeah,
occupation of them, and it's a big
yeah,
problem. And like my French
uh,
friends will have confirmed that as well. That there's a serious
yeah.
problem there.
A French Algerian comrade was one of those people who was like, there's this weird thing where it's like you're either French or you're not.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Come from one of those colonized countries or
That's
post-colonial
right.
countries, French-speaking countries, then you're not French.
And they make it's like, well, I don't want to say like they, because that's kind of generalizing, but I've actually heard like people, if you speak French with like a slightly quote
Oh yeah,
incorrect accent, like they'll really fucking like hammer you for that. If you speak Algerian French, or if you speak such and such French, it's not like Parisian French or whatever. Like there's a lot of people who
right.
will
I
give
mean,
you a really hard time for
there's,
that.
yeah, there's definitely a lot there. It's a very complex, political situation in France.
Definitely, yeah.
And it's really difficult to, you've got in Calais, you've got refugee camps that are constantly set upon by fascists, where to the point where nonprofits are having a hard time dropping off food
Mm,
and drops in the middle of the forest, right? So you've got these giant refugee camps that, are sort of like the French government is just kind of, you know, you've also got, a very violent sort of geopolitical situation happening all around where you've got refugees who are in Paris, paperless folks who are undocumented, who are also trying to strike for their own um, noir, right? And they are undocumented immigrants, right?
mm,
And they are fighting back, racism, and they are fighting back the sort of anti-immigrant sentiment that is huge.
right.
Um, It across all of Europe, honestly. And
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's the same shit here. We have the same anti-immigrant sentiment here, right?
Mm,
The United States engenders fucking massive, dangerous, horrible conflicts in South America, and then it shuts the doors on the refugees that they create
mm.
at the
Jesus,
border.
that's fucking bleak, isn't
So
it? That's the
it's great.
imperialist system, I suppose.
Imperialism is so fun. Oh,
Oh
it's
boy,
great.
gotta love it. God love it. Yeah, creating
Definitely
problems all over the world.
a
Fucking hell,
mind fuck living in the imperial core too.
yeah.
Having to see, when people direct their hatred at Americans, it's like I get it. I totally get it.
Actually, I wanted to bring something that's kind of related to that up a little bit earlier on, because I think at some stage we kind of got onto like chauvinism and stuff like that at some point earlier in the conversation, and I wanted to, we were talking about like the protesters and stuff like that, and I wanted to maybe discuss a little bit the left, or so-called left, the pseudo left, if you want to call them that, who were kind of like defending like the kind of almost like the MAGA crowd. Like it's almost as though there's like a liberal conservative division in the left in some cases, and there's like people who would claim to be, no, it's not really anarchists, mostly like some people who would claim to be Marxist Leninists, but are super revisionists. They'll talk about like socialism with like American characteristics. They'll talk about all this kind of stuff, and they're not dealing with the colonial question. They're not dealing with like the national question. Super opposed to decolonization. Super opposed to any kind of reasonable handling of the historical legacy of building a country on the backs of slaves and founding it on genocides. And I'm really upset seeing a lot of people in the United States taking that particular path, and I'm seeing more of it creeping onto our spaces, our left wing Twitter spaces, YouTube, podcasts, all this kind of thing, and it's kind of shitty. It's really shitty to see. People just are not dealing with the colonial question, with the national question. They're not respecting the national liberation question, the question of like our indigenous comrades, our new African, or whatever you say, like black comrades, in the United States. Like people are just not really dealing with their problems, like white people in the US in particular, and it's shitty to see, So I don't know. I wonder if you had any thoughts on this. This probably isn't as much of a thing like in kind of like anarchist spaces. I think anarchists are pretty good on this question, but I'm really frustrated about this, especially like in ML spaces. I don't know. Have you any thoughts on this? Like you do have leftists who are like jumping to the defense of people who went to that protest, or excuse me, who stormed the Capitol, if you want to call it that, in the last few days. Like people who sort of claim themselves to be leftists, or even communists in some case, and it's pretty fucking disillusioning to see it, to be honest.
There's been a lot of hot takes coming out of Twitter about that.
Yeah, a
One thing,
lot on
one thing,
Twitter.
one thing that I have to remind myself is that Twitter is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the actual radical left in the United States. Um, they may be the most vocal because they have a platform,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
But if you listen to and talk to actual organizers on the ground who don't have social media, it does not even filter into their consciousness that these dumbasses are talking about this stuff.
Thank fuck.
It's when you get into like real organizing work, I shouldn't say real, I should say when you get into on the ground organizing work where you're working with each other in a physical space, those types of discussions maybe sort of like a passing fancy when you're actually digging your hands in.
Mm. Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mm.
Um, what I have to say though is that there's a lot of hot takes coming out of this because I think a lot of folks are trying to reconcile with the concept of, okay, so it's always sort of been kind of a three-way fight here, right? It's us versus the right versus the state. If you
Mm.
want to, like, I'm being reductive here, right? I'm
Sure, yeah.
trying really hard not to be, but in a simple sort of term, when you see far right forces coming up against the state, you have to sort of reconcile with, like I was saying earlier, insurrection is good.
Mm.
Fascist insurrection,
Based.
not good, you know?
Yes.
And so you have to kind of think about how some folks are trying to parse that out in their minds, if that makes sense.
Mm.
You know? And I think that, yeah, some of the takes are bad. They're class reductionists.
Oh yeah.
They're
Massively class reduction. And like
you
it's
know,
not even like class
it's based
reductionist.
in it's based in
Oh
it's
man.
like based in conjecture, you know?
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. it's
Like, do you
just
actually, we haven't surveyed the actual class makeup of the folks who showed up there, but it's pretty clear that, just from the folks who are being arrested, like maybe they aren't necessarily working class. Maybe they're business owners or people like that. Those are things that you kind of just have to think about. And there's just some wacky, wacky, wacky shit going on Twitter that I have
mm,
personally paid no attention to because I myself am sort of sitting in this space where I'm trying to parse out my own thoughts about it. And of course, because I'm a semi-public Twitter personality or on Twitch or whatever, a lot of those conversations happen in public
mm,
with an audience, right? But I don't
mm,
have all the answers. One thing I will say that bothers me, probably the worst take that I've seen so far, is folks who are like ACAB, but with an asterisk because a cop killed a protester.
yeah.
Oh, shit.
Oh,
Someone is at my door. Give me a
oh, yeah. You do your thing. You do your thing. I'll just answer a few questions in the chat while we're
Yep,
talking this.
sure.
Oh boy,
Cool.
the question of Caleb Mappin has come up again. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Criticize Mappin, but don't use random memes. Roberto Cobelli. I massively agree with that. I think that's a good point. The criticism of Caleb Mappin should not be that he wears suits or that he speaks a certain way or that he shit, I don't know. He said Burger King once, which is funny because actually that's kind of
Jesus.
how we pronounce burger in Ireland. But yeah, have proper principled criticisms if you're going to have them. Have criticisms about this chauvinist ideology rather than having criticisms about what people wear. It's fucking ridiculous. That's why ultimately why a lot of the criticisms coming from like the bread tube sphere kind of fell flat on their faces because ultimately they were very aesthetically based when there are serious material problems with what he's saying. So yeah, I don't know how much we need to dive into that, but yeah, I'm definitely growing a lot more skeptical of him and his what he's doing over there. So yeah, anyway. Oh, are you back?
Anyway, yes, I'm back.
Oh,
Sorry,
I was.
Amazon delivery driver. That scared the shit out of me.
I hope you got your delivery anyway.
Oh yeah, I did. I did for sure. Anyways, what I was saying is, ACAB, but with an asterisk. So it's this concept of like, folks who have been sitting there talking about dismantling the institution of policing, cheer on that a QAnon supporter gets shot in the chest by Secret Service while she's trying to climb through a window. Um,
Mm,
I don't particularly like that take. I'm still trying to square my own thoughts with that, but I just, you know, um, I'm an anti-state individual, and I think policing is a disgusting sort of symptom of the ruling class trying to maintain control over a proletariat or a working class.
mm.
And it's
Can I
hard to sort
ask?
of reconcile this, right?
No,
Hmm.
because I think that what you're saying is something that we all feel so deeply. Like I definitely feel it here in Tala in Dublin. Like just the police are just such a tyrannical force here. But I'm interested to know, like, what would you say about, like, for example, the Black Panther Party policing the police, that kind of thing, like actual, like the people doing this, but for the people. How does that? How do you feel about that kind of situation?
You're talking about alternatives to policing?
By the people, for the people, rather than
Mhm.
necessarily the kind of state power that we think of right now.
I don't have all the answers to that one. What I will say in my own personal sort of, I'm slowly but surely moving towards a staunchly abolitionist stance toward policing in the
Mm,
carceral state in the United States.
mm,
Um, I think it needs to be abolished in its current form. What it gets replaced with, um, I think community defense and community policing is something that's, extremely important to think about. I also think a lot about restorative justice and what that means, right? Not punitive justice, restorative justice.
mm,
These are sort of utopian in the sense that, just as we try to imagine a society without capitalism, it's very difficult. Um, the bottle's finally empty.
Congrats.
How much beer does Mel have in that bottle? A lot, apparently.
My
I've just kind of
bottle's
been sipping on
still
it for 2 hours.
my bottle's still like three quarters full, but it's a massive bottle of vodka, so a quarter of a bottle of vodka, I guess, is
Yeah,
It's something.
part of me wants to just get some booze delivered if we're gonna keep talking about this. Anyways, so the, this is a great conversation, by the way. I really appreciate this. This
No,
is
it's
cool.
really interesting. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Thank you very much
Good.
for participating.
Yeah. So yeah, as far as like alternatives to the current state of policing, I don't have all the answers, man.
Mm,
In my own mind, right now, what we're trying to do is, local activists are trying to just improve the conditions of the community.
based. I love
That
that so much.
is, yeah, a lot of that is really trying to, we're just trying to move the needle
Mm,
a little bit. I just got out of a lawsuit where I sued myself and seven other plaintiffs sued the Omaha Police Department and the city of Omaha, um, because they uh, mass arrested 125 of us, including myself, and brutalized us on a bridge.
ooh. Can't just drop that bomb and not dive into it a little bit more.
Yeah, there was a protest happening back in July. It was a solidarity protest that was going on, with Portland. This was right after the feds had deployed to Portland and were causing a horrifying ruckus. So, local activists organized a solidarity march. And so what they did is, they organized a rally and a march. I was there as a journalist. I didn't participate in the march. But we, they marched all the way downtown and back. They were about a block away from dispersal where they started. The police had pretty much blocked off traffic the whole time, so folks were like, "Okay, well, you're declaring, you're saying, that we shouldn't be in the street, but yet you're blocking off traffic, and we have a right to be in the street because it's, our First Amendment right to do this." So
mm,
they're just going to continue sidewalk the whole time. It's about, I don't know, it was about a 2-mile march. Get back up over to where folks are just about to get back to their cars to disperse, and I'm standing on the sidewalk, and there's this bridge that's over a highway.
mm.
So you get on the bridge, you're over a highway. Um, and I'm literally texting this as I'm live tweeting it, going, "This is a great kettle spot." And I look up and cop cars move in.
Fuck.
They had waited until the bulk of the march was already on the bridge. They pulled cop cars behind and trapped them behind, and they pulled cop cars in front and stood in front and stopped the march. There were 130-ish people still on the bridge. And to give you a sense of literally there's nowhere to go. The only way to go anywhere is to climb up over the fence and jump down onto the highway below.
Mm.
So there was
How
no
low? How high are we talking from the ground?
no, it's, 2 stories.
2 stories, right? Okay.
So, onto a interstate highway. So
Uh-huh.
there's nowhere to go. Trapped, completely trapped. I'm there with my crew. I'm standing on the sidewalk. I'm trying to separate myself from the protesters because that's just kind of how you do it as
Mm,
a journalist, right? Trying to observe but stay separate. Press pass is open. You know, people. I look like this, right? I have my hat on, but I have a
mm,
giant press pass, right, that says where I'm from, who I am. The 2 guys I'm with who are in my crew also had press passes, and so we're standing there, and I'm standing there, and I'm filming, and there are protesters who are jumping onto the sidewalk over this railing behind us. So we're getting crowded in by a bunch of protesters. We can't go anywhere because the cops are like, "Prepare to get arrested. You're not going anywhere." And these folks are like, "We're just trying to go home, man. Like, just let us go home. Our cars are right there." And they're like,
mm,
"Absolutely not. Nope, sorry." Um, Protester, his name is Mark. He tries to go for it. He sees an opening and he rides his bike up to the police line. They knock him off his bike. He steps back 5 feet. He's the police, and they just lift their pepper ball guns and fire a round of pepper balls into his chest.
fucking hell.
Um, and then ran down the folks who were still in the street and arrested them. These people are my friends. They're part of my community, and to see them
Mm,
get grabbed by cops, come up, and their face is bloody, it was like horrible.
yeah, 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 of
I
course.
I was filming all of this. Sir came up, this fucking dump truck of a douchebag. I just want to say, if you ever listen to this one cop, fuck you. asshole.
He's a
I
big
am
fan of the show.
filming.
Be careful
He's
what I
like
say.
6'5". He's like 6'5". Huge, huge linebacker motherfucker. And he fucking just grabs me by the shirt, shoves me so hard that I fucking hit the fucking deck. And I like, dude, I nearly fucking brained myself on this railing. My friends were like, holy shit. I got my phone back and I kept filming. And I was filming for like 10 minutes or so. And they started arresting people.
Mm.
And then they turned to us. Two cops were like, prepare to get arrested. And we're like, press passes, cell phone in hand, still filming. Press pass, we're press. And they're like, press, okay, move that way. And then someone else comes up and goes, arrest them. And so we got arrested with the rest of them. And we were
How'd that
on
go?
that bridge for like, we were like, just like, okay, I guess we're getting arrested. Like we
Mm.
got press passes, man. They're like, we got intel that those are fake. We don't believe you. We think that you're faking it and all this shit. And we're like, shit, what do we do? I get put in zip ties and sat across the street from my colleagues. And I'm sitting next to two protesters who have gotten shot in the chest with pepper balls and they can't breathe. I'm sitting next to a legal observer who got body slammed by a cop and is having a hard time feeling his hands. And
Mm.
we sat on that bridge for 2.5 hours. Or us press got let go, but the rest of the folks went to a COVID infested jail where they spent the night, and then half of them didn't even get charged by the prosecutor. So they mass arrested 130 people and they violated the rights of every single one of those people. And so
Jesus.
this lawsuit was levied by the ACLU in Nebraska on behalf of myself, the legal observer, and like 6 other protesters who got the worst of it. And we sued the city of Omaha and we sued the Omaha Police Department. And just recently, yesterday, actually, we came to a settlement with them that guaranteed, significant protections for protesters and press in exchange for dropping the lawsuit because we were going to sue them for damages and
Mm.
keep them in federal court for fucking months. So kind
How
of a
did it go?
win. Uh,
How did that end up?
we got the city and the police department to enter into an agreement that says that they drop any appeals for trying to get charges to stick for any of the other protesters who were arrested that
Mm.
night. Cops are required to wear their badges and their badge numbers. And if you ask them what their name and badge number is, they are now required by a federal court to verbally respond to you. They can't ignore you,
Ah,
which
okay.
is huge.
Some progress, yeah,
There's a
definitely.
lot of which means, for folks here, it's, there's an accountability process set up, but if you don't know the cop's name, how can you even start?
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of protections for marching in the street and for the use of chemical weapons on protesters. So a lot of that is really good steps in the right direction. Is that the solution? No. It's,
Mm.
long-term solution? No. Is that a step in the right direction? Hell yes. Is the work over? Absolutely not. The work continues, the fight continues. But it was it was nice to be able to lend some sort of, help to that lawsuit and hold the city accountable because all of them are dicks and they deserve to get put in shackles a little bit.
Fuck yeah. Thank you very much, comrade.
Do my best.
Oh my god,
Do my best with the tools I got. You know?
Yeah, absolutely, and you're killing it with the tools you got. So thank you. And so I'm just thinking, it's like 2.5 hours in. It's like two and a
Mm-hmm.
half hours in, and I think we only properly got to about question 3 out of questions like 1 to 9.
We've been talking about a lot of different shit.
Yeah, but I suppose we've been vibing. We've been talking about this. We talked about that, the other,
Yeah.
etc. and so forth. So, yeah, I suppose we should push forward. It's that time again where again, fork in the road. gotta run to the bathroom or wrap things up. So maybe I'll give you another question. You can vibe people in the chat, answer the question at your leisure, and yeah. What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, sure. I think let's try for like another. How do you feel about just like another half hour?
Yeah, I think the 3 hour mark is a pretty good time to kind of wrap things up. I think that'd be pretty
Pretty
wise.
solid.
Yeah, yeah. We don't want to do like a 5 hour, 10, 24 hour stream.
Dude, maybe one of these days we'll commit to a 24-hour stream or something and just like get a bunch of people to come on.
Yeah,
Big
definitely.
fun
We'll get other people.
for
Yeah, yeah,
jail
definitely.
scores shit.
That'd be pretty base, yeah. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Very cool. So there's a bunch of things that I wanted to ask you about. Maybe we'll try to kind of just put them all into one. Well, I don't know how that's gonna work. I was gonna ask you how you got into podcasting. I think you pretty much talked about
We
that. You talked about like bread
yeah,
and
we've talked
stuff.
about that. We talked about getting into podcasting. What
Yeah,
else is there to talk
detained by
about?
the police while reporting. I think we
That,
just covered
that,
that.
yep,
We talked about reporting in Paris.
we did.
We talked a little bit about that. We were also going to talk about your experience of reporting over summer 2020. I suppose that's the George Floyd uprising and stuff like that. We talked about that a little bit. I don't know if we went into that to like the full depths that we could, and there's probably a little bit more to take out of that. But did you want to jump into any
Yeah.
of those? Yeah,
Yeah, we can, the reporting over the summer last summer was pretty wild.
yeah. Okay, awkward because I really want to hear about this, but I also really need to go to the bathroom.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, I'll be back in a sec. So
Sounds
yeah,
good.
yeah. If you want to just like check it in the chat there, there's some stuff going on. You can see what people are talking about, and maybe something like that will be. You'll find something there of interest and of use.
Cool.
Cool. Back in a sec.
Cool, cool. Yeah, indeed. Hello, chat. It's a little hard to, there's a lag on the chat. So I'm looking at the chat from the live stream, but I don't see the chat from the other side of it. So I'm seeing a bunch of lagged messages. But hope everyone's doing well and has enjoyed this stream. I've enjoyed being on it. So I don't know. At this point, what do I do? Plug my Twitter account? Like, hi. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the gulagism. I have no idea. But hey, here's my Twitter account if you want it, in case you're curious. Want to follow me? So there you go. It's in chat. Why is it called kettling? Oh, that's a really, really good question. Not entirely certain why it's specifically called kettling, but it is a specific tactic that is used to essentially surround a group of individuals, prevent them from leaving an area so that you can um, uh, um, arrest them all, essentially. It can be done with bikes, shields, just bodies, sheer numbers of bodies. On the bridge, it was very much cars and police bodies. So you can't run past a bunch of uh, trucks. It just doesn't happen. So as far as tactics go for um, as far as tactics go for that, like probably a ill-advised idea to take a bridge back to your dispersal spot. Um, but I'm not sure that these activists necessarily knew what was going on with that. So they just kind of walked right into it. Also, I'm posting the links to my stuff in chat if you give a shit.
I'm sure all the people give a shit. I'm sure they do.
So I got my Twitch, my personal Twitter, and my podcast Twitter. So
Very cool.
but
Please do subscribe, follow, like, all that good stuff. All that good stuff.
yeah.
Support our comrade.
Thank you.
And Patreon as well. Debt.
Oh yes, Patreon. Patreon.com forward
Help out.
slash cold brew. Everything is cold brew tool at this point. So
Wait, what? I wanted to ask what's that? What's that come from? Cold brew tool.
there's no significance to it. I just didn't know what to call myself,
Just
and
words.
yeah, just words. I think there was some joke about cold brew coffee at some point, and I just thought
Oh,
I
it
yeah,
worked
village idiot.
somewhat.
That's pretty
Oh,
much
come
me.
on.
Like cold brew tool. I don't know. But by the time that I figured that I might want to change it, I realized that there was like some weird sort of like brand recognition, I guess. So I haven't changed
Ah,
it.
yeah.
So it's just,
Oh,
that's just who I am.
yeah. I hate when that that reality hits.
Right.
I've had that as
Yeah.
well a few times where I'm just like, oh shit, I should probably change my name because if you are anywhere near approximating like a revolutionary leftist and you are using your actual name, oof, you are signing yourself up for a world of trouble because people can look you up in terms of like
No,
doxing, in terms
I've
of
been doxxed twice last year,
oh my
actually.
god, I'm so sorry to hear that. And just by
Yeah.
random people or
Nazis.
fucking Nazis.
Yeah.
Brett as well.
Um,
Brett from Rev Left as well. I think he's had like people showing up at his door, like Nazis showing up at his foot the door of his
mhm.
home. Like
Yeah.
really crazy stuff. Um,
Yeah, yeah. As I've gotten deeper into journalism, I have s- decided to just become more comfortable with using my real name,
good.
Mel Buer.
Mm,
Um, it was a conscious decision on my part, and I knew that would come with risk, and it did, clearly.
yeah.
You know who Andy No is, right?
I want to say
He's a
yes to
far-right
be
journalist who steals a lot of
affable, but
footage from folks out of Portland.
oh no, I
He
haven't
likes
heard
to
of
speak
this.
about Antifa a lot. He's well known,
Mm,
in, left journalist circles because he likes to steal your footage and then
ah,
manipulate the narrative, and, I managed to successfully issue a takedown notice to him and another one of his associates a couple of months ago,
mm,
and it kind of went a slightly viral on Twitter, which means it also caught the attention of some other assholes, and,
always.
I got doxxed.
Fuck.
The first time I got doxxed is because I was reporting on a white supremacist who killed himself, after he killed a black man
Mm,
here in Omaha. He was indicted on those charges, and, he, um, he took his own life as a result, and,
right.
folks on the far right blamed me for driving him to suicide
Ah,
as a
fuck him.
journalist, and so they posted pictures of my apartment online and stuff and
Like, oh
figured out where
shit.
I lived. Yeah. Um
Did anything? Nobody like showed up or anything like that.
Thankfully not, but the second time around, it was a little unnerving because I got doxxed again, and then someone, walked up, on my balcony, I was smoking a cigarette, and,
Mm,
they, walked up and they called me out by name and knew, like, some job that I used to work at that's not public knowledge, and I don't
fuck's
know who they
sake.
are, and, they asked me a lot of really personal questions that they shouldn't know about me, and it was really
So
quite
this was just
freaky.
like an intimidation tactic.
And I don't know who they were. I don't know if they were far right or whatever, but, like, it
Wow.
was right after I got doxxed the second time, and I was like,
That's kind of like
"Okay."
we know you. Yeah, that's kind of like an intimidation thing where like we know you, we know these things about you. We can ask these very personal questions.
Yeah.
We've got that information on you. So
Yeah, and it was like, "Okay, right, alright, so
fuck.
I'm gonna arm myself,"
Yeah, shotgun, just sitting
Yeah,
there on like a rocking
uh,
chair on the porch
Jezediah, I do have some actually in Minecraft.
in Minecraft.
Uh, I
In
just I just
Minecraft,
I just need to procure the
ammunition in Minecraft.
instruments in Minecraft, yeah. So anyways, so, like, that's,
Fucking hell.
that sort of stuff is
Yeah,
just
it's
kind of
heavy.
wild, right?
Yeah.
And, honestly, like, it's just kind of part and parcel for the political situation that's going on, in this country, is that if you use your full name online and you piss off someone like the Fash, then, that may just be it sucks to say, but that may just be how things go.
Yeah.
And, that's not gonna stop me from being an anti-fascist and from doing this work, so, you
Based
know?
Extremely
Yeah.
based.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So, what
Tough
were we
though.
talking about?
Oh, I'm sure there were
Minneapolis.
questions. Yes, yes. Reporting over summer 2020.
Yeah. Um, it was an interesting experience. We'll say that. I'm trying to be. That sounds flippant. It was a
Don't
very.
don't
It was
hold
a
back.
very. It was a very inspiring, incredible, terrifying, absolutely insanely cool experience reporting in Minneapolis. I prior to that point have just been kind of focusing on grad school, and shit popped off in Minneapolis. George Floyd was murdered. God rest him. And we were watching these live streams, and I'm about a 6 hour drive away from Minneapolis, and we were watching live streams, and we were watching what was going on. Um, and a couple of activists that I know here um, had asked me if I was going to go to Minneapolis to cover the events. Originally, I said no. I wasn't going to go. And then I'm not. The third precinct got lit on fire,
Hmm.
and I was like, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to link up with comrades there, and I'm going to see what I can do to help sort of boost this coverage as an independent journalist. And so I went, and I was there for about 3 days. And um, I got in at like 2:30 in the morning, and half the city was still on fire. And um, we showed up. We parked about 3 blocks away from this bar that was on fire, and um, we walked up, and there was a full blown riot happening. The precinct was still burning. Half the block had been burnt down, and it was like a block party. It was beautiful. Folks were um, extremely happy and just kind of
Hmm.
hanging out. Not long after that, the National Guard showed up and people split. And they just didn't, they didn't want to go toe to toe at 5 in the morning with National Guard troops. So
Hmm.
they all went their separate ways, and the protest continued the next day. I think the biggest takeaway from that is that the community really came together to make sure that mutual aid was the name of the game, as these businesses were burnt down. Folks didn't have to go hungry, and there was a lot of righteous anger and a lot of mourning that the city was going through in the wake of George Floyd's death. The neighborhood, the neighborhood intersection where he was killed was turned into.
Oh, have we lost Mel? We may have lost our comrade. Oh, Mel seems to have frozen. Stalin
How about
haunting the
now?
airwaves. Oh, Mel, you're back. Sorry, I'm sorry. You
No
froze.
worries.
You froze for a little while there. You were
No, it's
talking about
cool.
the.
Yeah, my internet sucks. Like I said before we started, I need to get my internet fixed.
We'll talk after the stream. We'll talk about this.
Yes,
Yeah. Send me a message
yes.
because I've had a few drinks and I'll need to see that message tomorrow to remember.
Okay. Yep. Anyways, so yeah, so I don't know where I was. Where was I at?
Oh, the neighborhoods, mutual aids. They came together.
Oh yeah,
Um,
so they really came together to help each other out. Now, remember, this is 2.5 months into a pandemic that has, uh, yes, Mel has been swallowed by a twister. Tornadoes are cool. Don't knock them till you try them. Anyways, so the communities have been decimated by just this economic disgusting bullshit that had happened because pandemic life, folks are losing their jobs. Um, they don't have the ability to help themselves, because they're not getting their unemployment insurance and all this other shit. So it was really interesting to see how the community, you know, of I I I maintain to this day that a large portion of the expropriated groceries that came out of Target and the grocery stores around that neighborhood were dropped off the next day at mutual aid food donation drives that were happening down the street,
mm,
simply because the sheer volume of food that showed up. Um, the folks were cleaning up the riot, the remnants of the riots. They were helping each other out. They were making sure that folks were able to um, maintain some semblance of stability, even as the rest of the city was sort of kind of coming down around their ears. And it was really fucking sweet to see. It was really cool, you
Yeah.
know. On the other side, you've got this direct action. You've got people going toe to toe with the National Guard, um, and defying curfew ordinances because they truly believed in what they were demanding, which was accountability for the officers who killed George Floyd. The one thing that I, you know, my last day there was probably the most terrifying, just because seeing how the state cracked down on people, um, was something that I haven't seen before. There were folks who were staging a sit-in protest outside of a different precinct down the road from the third. It was the fifth, I think,
Mm.
because some of the officers who had responded to the call about George Floyd were um, from the fifth precinct, I think.
Mm.
They had already abandoned the precinct in the sense that they had locked it down. They had put these huge fences up so like people couldn't access the building at all. But folks were demonstrating outside of it. And there were a lot of people, right? The night before, there was a riot that had destroyed the bank that was like catty corner from the police department. I watched that Wells Fargo burn to the ground. It was pretty wild. And the various neighborhoods had been, engaged in essentially like pitched street battles the night before, all the way around, tear gas everywhere. And it's real tense the next day where folks are like, we're going to do a sit in. We're defying curfew. They can't tell us not to be here. We're demanding this stuff. There were probably, I don't know, probably like 1,500 people there, give or take, maybe 2 or 3,000. I don't know exactly the numbers, but they filled up the whole neighborhood, right? Filled up
Mm.
the whole intersection. And the cops moved in about an hour after curfew was called. And I will never fucking forget that feeling. It was unreal, unreal. They were sending volleys of flashbangs and tear gas for about 25 minutes constantly. It was going off, just bang, 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 bang. And these folks are sitting on the concrete and this shit is blowing up in their laps. And you've got press all along the side who are trying to get a good spot. And all you can see through the smoke, because there's like blue and yellow smoke, and then there's tear gas, and all you can see is just this line of like 50 across, 10 deep riot cops, robo-cops, just walking forward slowly. It was the most terrifying moment of my life. I have never fucking seen anything like it. And, oh my God, it was wild. They dispersed the crowd. Crowd is like walking backwards, hands up, they are trying their best to stay together. It's just really scary. It was scary for them too. They're trying to stay close. They get pushed out of the intersection into a parking lot and then they start scattering because, now it's just, cops with their rubber bullets pointing it at your chest,
Mm.
just shooting people indiscriminately. Um, I had heard about an hour
Jeez.
before that they were targeting and arresting independent journalists who looked like protesters.
Whew.
Hi. So and unfortunately the person that I came with got scared and ditched me in the middle of this police riot. So I had to sneak my way out from behind the police barricades that they had set up like a 5 by 5 block barricade around this area to catch anyone who was walking past. I managed to get outside of the barricade and linked back up with the person that I had lost, and then linked up with a couple of other journalists. And it took a while for us to get to the other journalists because we had to sneak back around the barricade to pick them up in my car. By the time we got to them, we were leaving the neighborhood. It was dark. We were leaving the neighborhood, and I'm driving, and I look in my rearview mirror, and there's this car following me. I'm like, okay. So I took a left turn, and then I took another left turn, and then I took another left turn, and the car followed me. And we
Oof.
realized we were being tailed by someone, and we didn't know who it was. We had heard rumors that maybe like, Proud Boys or some other fash were like patrolling neighborhoods or something, but we didn't really know,
Mm.
like because they were just kind of unsubstantiated rumors about these neighborhood watch types or whatever. It doesn't matter. We were getting tailed and we couldn't get out of the neighborhood because everywhere we turned, we realized we were still being followed. I think it was about 35 minutes or so that we were being followed by this person when finally one of my journalist friends in the back seat goes, "Okay, do you remember that one street that had those security guards standing outside that coffee shop?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Drive there." And I'm like, "Okay." So we pulled up and this is armed security that's standing outside this coffee shop that has been hired by this coffee shop or donut shop or whatever, to make sure that it doesn't get burnt down by rioters. And we
Mm.
pull open, we roll down the window super quick and we say, "Look, we got this guy following us. Can you help us, please?" And they were like, "What?" And it's like, "We're journalists. This guy doesn't know who we are. Can you help us, please?" And they were like, "Okay, cool." So they walked up to this guy's car because he pulled up right behind us and they've got their hands on their hips on their holstered firearms. Okay. And they walk up to this dude's car and he speeds around him, nearly runs one of the security guards over, and then stops about like a block-ish ahead of us and sits there. And so now we've got armed security standing around my vehicle because, we showed him our press passes and we were like, "Look, man, we're just trying to get across the city. We don't know who this person is. We're not trying to, we just, this is a volatile situation,
Mm.
and they're like, "Well, if you can sit here and just chill, we'll see what we can do." Right.
Mm.
And, um, they tried to flag the guy down and say, "Look, this guy, these people are journalists." Whoever was in the car went around the block, drove past the car again, parked again, jumped out of his vehicle, popped his trunk, and pulled what looked like a long gun out of his trunk
Fucking
and got back in
hell.
his car. And we were like, "Oh my God. Okay,
Yeah.
what do we do?
What the
What do we
fuck?
do?" And the guys are like, these security guards, God bless them. They were so nice, like they were just sitting there and they were just having like, they were talking to us like, "Thanks for coming. You guys are great, independent journalists," all this stuff. And we sat there for 3.5 hours waiting to see if we could leave. We were stuck. We couldn't do anything.
Fucking
What could you do? Like if we leave, we might get tailed. We might not be able to find further help. We don't know who this guy is and what his intentions are. We have no clue. No clue.
mm.
Likelihood is he was someone who was pissed off about folks climbing through his neighborhood and being rioters, and he mistook us for rioters or something.
Yeah.
Because I had out of state plates. The outside agitator narrative had been percolating for a couple of days, and he didn't take the time to see who we were. Right? He
Yeah.
didn't care, whoever it was. Um,
That's so
finally,
fucked up.
he drives off and he doesn't come back. And we were like, "Okay, we're gonna smoke a cigarette. We're gonna figure out what to do next." And I start, finally I get to the point where it's like, "Okay, we just got to get back to the hotel." Right.
Mm.
The problem is we had been sitting there for long enough that we were too far past curfew, that the bridges to St. Paul, where our hotel was located, had been blockaded by the police and the National Guard. And so we had absolutely no way to get around a roadblock because there is a river that runs between the two cities. And you have to drive 3.5 hours around in order to really find your way back to the space where our hotel was located.
Oh,
So
fuck.
all the interstates are closed. All the bridges are closed. We're hearing reports that folks are getting stopped at the bridges, and it doesn't matter who you are, you'll get arrested. Right. And then one of my friends who's listening to police scanners sends me a message and says, "Hey, do you have Nebraska plates?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Pretty sure someone called in your plates on the scanner." And
No.
I was like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, suspicious vehicle with Nebraska plates matching your car's description." And I was like,
Fucking hell.
"What do we do?" And my friends in the back seat are like, "Okay, you know what? Let's get a hotel. Let's find our way out." So we snuck out of Minneapolis and we found a hotel, like, I don't know, like fucking 35 minutes outside of the city limits. Coincidentally, where a bunch of National Guard folks were mustering. So, like, we walked in as like a bunch of National Guard folks were like in the lobby, clearly coming from this, haggard, journalists coming from this protest. Um, and
Don't mind
we
us.
we we got a hotel room. We stayed the night. We waited for the interstate to open up, And then I dropped my journalist friends back off at wherever, where their house was, which was within the police blockade the night before, um, wherever they were staying, and then got the fuck out of Dodge and left.
Yeah.
Like us out of towners, we left. We were like, you know what, we should probably just go home. And on the drive back, things popped off in Omaha, and so I was just, back on the ground running, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's been an experience, and it didn't really slow down in Omaha either. There's been, same sort of organizing, the same sort of like insane movements, and it's been, despite all the sort of terror and getting caught up in a lot of this stuff, the the big takeaway from the last 8 months is this has been such a galvanizing, inspiring force for a new generation of political activists in this country, and it has probably been one of the greatest joys of my life to see how it's unfolded.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
like I'm just an anarchist journalist. I'm
Mm.
just here to try and uplift these stories. These folks are putting their fucking lives on the line to do this, and it is absolutely amazing to see. Uh, what they've accomplished so far. And the potential for that is huge, huge. Like it's really hard to overstate exactly how fucking cool watching left organizing in this country has been over the last 8 months.
Mm.
We're all fucking going through it. We are all like, we are all having a hard time coming up against the state, but that's really not. It's really not going to deter these folks. I don't think.
Mm. Mm.
This is a long game. It's not we're not it seems to me, and I tend to believe this, that we're not in this for a quick and fast solution. This really is sort of a long haul, and a lot of folks are settling in for it, and that's
Mm.
really cool.
Mm.
You know what
Mm.
I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, and so this insurrectionary moment with the far right here is something that a lot of the leftists here have already, we already knew it was going to happen. So
Mm.
now it's just a matter of how do we mobilize against that?
Mm.
And I'm sure conversations are happening all over the country,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So,
And let's we probably can't talk too much about what those conversations are going like. We don't want to get into any trouble with our YouTube overlords,
right.
but yeah, definitely there's definitely a need for hmm, how can I say this? Fight fire with fire. Is that going too far? Is that suggesting something that might get us into
I,
trouble?
I don't have to, I don't really,
No
I don't
comments.
really, yeah, I don't really speak on tactics here, mostly because of my position as a journalist.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. Of course. Yeah.
I, I don't want to get your stream banned, so I'm going to shut up.
Yes,
my,
yes.
my
No,
own,
wise decision.
my own personal thoughts would most definitely get me thrown off of social media.
Oh
So
yeah, I know that feeling all the time. You're always trying to like catch yourself. Oh, it's horrific, especially if you drink on stream live for people. Oh fuck, I gotta
yeah,
stop doing that. I gotta go easy
just
on the
got
alcohol.
self censorship a little bit. It's all
Yes,
good.
yes. Let's just say to the comments in the chat, you know what to do, and we'll leave it at that.
No incitements to insurrection here, especially
No,
after an incitement to insurrection 3 days
no.
ago from Donald. So
We
we are
definitely don't advocate the people rising up. We definitely don't advocate people's war.
absolutely
No
not.
way. No
No,
way,
we don't
Jose.
have that at all. Incremental change through electoralism.
Yes, reform is good. That's the way forward. If there's one thing you should take from this stream, it's that we can solve all our problems by getting the right Democrat into office in the United
Right.
States, and everything's going to be cool. Imperialism's going to stop magically, like that.
Perfect. Yep. Anyway,
Comrade,
so
thank
that
you
is
so
that
much.
is like the yeah, that's the most basic that I can do, encapsulating eight and a half months of reporting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
No, it was
emotional.
great. No, it was really, really interesting, really, really insightful as well. And thank you so much for that. And also scary. Definitely scary as well. Hearing about this stuff, like really wild to hear about the intimidate. Like we can kind of expect harassment from state forces, from the police, from other arms of the state. But it sounds like the person who was tailing you, as you're talking about there, was just some sort of like vigilante or something like that, and
Mhm.
that's quite concerning. So definitely people who are getting involved in radical left wing politics. If you're living in the confines of the United States, do be aware of the unfortunate potentialities which do await you. You know,
Yeah, it's just a lot of reaction out of fear, I think.
yeah,
Fear and hatred. It's a pretty divisive country that we live in, and I think a lot of leftists here have already experienced some sort of something similar, you know?
yeah,
I think the vast majority of us don't have any illusions about where we stand with all of this, you know?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, it was certainly an experience that I'm not likely to forget and has actually, something that I think about often when I go out to go, um, uh, cover these events now,
Mm,
you know?
mm.
Like, the gearing up for the new year also includes a bulletproof vest, if that gives you any sort
Good.
of inclination as to, like, where we're at in this country.
Oh my fucking god, yeah. Protect yourselves, comrades. Please, please
Yeah.
fuck protect yourselves. Learn some self-defense. Learn how to get away from these kinds of altercations, to avoid these kinds of altercations. I mean, unfortunately, if you're confronted with a guy with a knife or something like that who comes for you, I mean, it's even if you're like a black belt in karate or something like that, it's still very, very difficult to get out of that situation. I encourage people to actually look up those situations. You can actually see videos on YouTube of how it goes. You have like these black belts karate experts, and someone comes at them like with a knife just under. They can't do shit. They can't do a fucking thing, because it kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's still kind of it's very shocking. Take this shit seriously. Take this stuff very, very seriously, because there are serious threats to our well-being as individuals, as collectives, as a class. They're coming for us. The fascists, the state forces, the individuals, their bourgeois collective. Um, they're fighting back against us, and we need to be prepared for that. So please do take this
Better
seriously. Don't be
Yeah, it's better
flippant
to be
about it.
prepared and never have to use it than,
And
not
don't
be prepared
Yeah, don't the
and have
and
to
I
figure
think
it
the
out.
fascists, the Proud Boys and stuff, they fucking know that. They show up to these protests, and they're training for a proper. It's like they're training for an insurrection when they're doing these protests. They're
Oh,
wearing
yeah.
like helmets, body armor, and all kinds of stuff.
The
Really
one
just
thing that the one thing that they aren't doing is wearing face coverings, which is hilarious, which is why so many
mm,
people have been identified from the
coughing.
Capitol already because
Just go
women
cough
wearing
on them.
masks, like, man, okay, you wanna commit, like, a federal crime, an insurrection, be labeled a treasonous, seditionist douchebag, probably wear a face covering.
The least you could do. And you just
Yeah.
wear a mask, like
Now
a
your
normal
face is
COVID
on
mask.
right, right, now your face is on national news. Good luck.
Yeah, it's some
Yeah, good
clown
luck getting
shit.
out of that one.
Absolute
But
clown shit.
anyway.
Anyway,
Anyway, that
Mel,
was wow, this was a long conversation. This was
three
good.
hours, 3 hours of vibing.
Just vibing, man.
Just hanging out, having fun, getting to know each other, chilling. Mel, thank you so much for coming on. It's been absolutely great. I've learned a ton. It's been really, really useful. I am sure that people in the chat will agree that this has been a really interesting, entertaining, enlightening, and useful and informative conversation. Thank you so much. Just before we wrap up, do you want to do any quick shout outs? Do you want to plug any work that you've upcoming? I know we talked a little bit at the start about your upcoming Twitter projects, but maybe if you want to shout it out again for comrades who weren't there. I mean, it's 3 hours ago. Not that many people watch a stream for 3 hours. Some do, but not that many. So probably a good chance to shout it out again. And any other upcoming work that you have, or any ongoing work that you want to shout out, now's the time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So twitch.tv/cold brew tool is going to be where the Twitch show is. You can follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/cold brewed tool. Protein Pod at Protein Pod on Twitter is the Protein Podcast. If you want to listen to Protein Pirate Radio, I also have, because I I'm a workaholic. Cineproles is going to be the name of the podcast that will be talking about proletarian films and labor films. So keep a lookout on my Twitter for that. Buy Protein Magazine. Stay safe, stay vigilant, stay tight. Love y'all.
Based. You are much tighter at wrapping these things up than I am. I never ever know how to wrap up a stream, the end of a pod, nothing. I'm so awkward. I'm like, yeah, I guess we're ended, and yeah, okay.
You gotta have like a sign off, you know?
Yeah.
That's what you gotta do.
No, I do.
Plug all the shit and have a sign off.
Well, let me tell you, my sign off's really awkward. At the end of my videos, I do this because I'm not as concerned. But at the end of my videos, I say "talk to you soon" or "until next time" in Irish. I'll say "cheers, everybody." August slán go fóill. Just means August is and slán go fóill means like until next time or see you soon or talk to you soon. Basically just see you soon, you know. And if I do that in the chat, people are like, "What was that? What was that weird thing that you just said? What the fuck's a slán go fóill?" Doesn't
We could
work.
also have, we could also chat about, you know, the differences between Irish and Scottish Gaelic too.
Oh yeah,
so.
yeah, definitely. Oh, by the way, in Ireland we pronounce it Gaelic. Yeah, it sounds
In Scotland, it's Gaelic.
Gaelic. They say Gaelic.
Gaelic.
You know, it's funny. We when we talk about the sports, we talk about like GAA. We call that Ga. We call it Ga. So maybe that's related to that.
Yeah, I'll send you the spelling of the word actually, so
Yeah.
that you can see what it looks.
Yeah.
Anyways,
and the Irish language
are we
is.
still on? Are we still on?
Oh yeah, we're still live. We are still streaming. We're still live. We're still vibing. I should do a quick shout out to the people, to the comrades in the chat, and then we'll wrap this up. And
Yeah,
we'll
this is very much like a Midwestern goodbye. We're like, well, probably time to go. Probably time to go.
2 hours later. It's the same in Ireland. We do this as well. It's like, okay, bye. Yeah, cool. Yeah, and that thing about next week. Okay, yeah, bye. Just over and over.
Standing at the doorway, just like shit in hand. You know, 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
You get off at 20 minutes. Oh, you're doing well in the Midwest. I gotta say, in Ireland, it'd be
no,
2 hours.
It's like an hour and a half. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it's pretty
well, no, just come back inside, have another beer. You know, that's how that goes.
Yeah, another beer, another whiskey, another Guinness. That's
yeah.
That's on very well to Ireland. Let me quickly shout out the comrades in the chat, and then we'll wrap this up. Comrades in the chat, thank you so much for sticking around. Really appreciate you being here. Papi Chulo, Red Fenian Punk, Juche Necromancer, or RBRTIN 8, or Marbitten, I can't pronounce that. Microsoft Word's technical support, Andrea Ruak 97, Sydney Rika, ZZZ, Noble Sufferer, Louise Victor, Valti M, Jessidiah, System Machine, and Red Fenian Punk hologram of Wesley Wills, Darth Reven, and yeah, I think that's those are the comrades that I see right now. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you have enjoyed the stream this evening. Just a quick notification. Next week, I think there's probably going to be one stream next week. It'll be next Wednesday, and I'm going to be talking with a comrade from the Netherlands. We're going to be talking about communism in the Netherlands and the left-wing movement over there. That's going to be an interesting conversation. I don't think there's going to be 2 streams next week. I think there'll be 1 stream, and I'm hoping to get a video out next week. I'm starting this Socialism 101 course. Hopefully this will be up by next Friday, but it might be 2 Fridays from now. It just depends on how quickly I can kind of pull that together. I'm trying to do this kind of a like crash course communism thing, like a Socialism 101 kind of series. So let's see how that goes. I want it to be kind of decent quality. I don't want to like rush it and just really, you know, pump it out before next Friday, because, you know, it might not be fully ready, but if it is ready, and hopefully it will be, I'll have it out next Friday. I got the recording done today anyway. I was able to finish off the video today, so thankfully, because I tried to record it on Wednesday and it didn't go well. There was a problem with the camera. There was an issue with the autofocus function, and it was like blurring and focusing and blurring and focusing just over and over, and basically a full day's worth of recording video was just thrown away as a result of that. So anyway, yeah, I got that sorted out today, and yeah, hopefully everything's gonna be cool for next week. But if not next week, then certainly the week after. Comrades, I will see you again next Wednesday. Again, thank you so much to Mel Buer for coming on for this stream. It's been absolutely great. It's been really enlightening, really entertaining, really engaging, and definitely gonna have to have our comrade on again. We're gonna have to do this again soon. And yeah, so everybody, I'm going to try this now. Let me try the Irish outro. I'm not going to joke around and be like, solidarity, comrades. No, I'm going to. Just like
All right.
the typical outro. I'm going to say, cheers, everybody. August Slán go fóill. Which, if you don't know what that means talk to you soon in Irish.
Oh yeah. All right.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a good one.